Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another lifting episode. Today's episode is recorded on 9/3/23. We have actually gone to Jamestown and done separate energy report from there. But we are also combining this show with the recording we did 6 years ago on the Agents of Montauk in Jamestown, the original channeling, that Fuma cave. And I think that's actually very prevalent now. And you'd be surprised how much stayed the same, how much changed from there. But before we get into any lengthy discussions on the matter or any channelings of the sort, we need to open this circle to true benevolence with no conflicting agendas. This is the hidden history of Jamestown. So, Joanna, you want to bring in the law of one?
We are all one, and when one is harmed, all are harmed. When one is helped, all are helped. Therefore, in the name of who I am, and I am one with all there is, that only the highest good be done. I pray for you, your friends, your family, your loved ones, to let healing energies in. Let them love you and nourish you and bring you to your highest good. I pray for myself and Chris. We pray for our families, our loved ones, to let healing energies in, to let them love us and nourish us and bring us to our highest good. We invite in now all of our friends, all of our family, past, present, future, all of those who wish to participate in benevolence with no conflicting agendas to this conversation as we try to bring out information that you may have never heard before. So we ask for that to be done. We also send blessings again of healings out to everyone. We hope that, again, in order to have a free and open conversation, that benevolence can then help any mischievous or malevolence keeping us from having this conversation, can help sweep that out so we can clear the path in order to have this conversation to give you pause for thought, again, on histories that you may or may not have heard of. So with that, hopefully you're in agreement. We can all say, so be it.
So be it. Okay, this is actually quite interesting. It has been quite some time since we were in Jamestown. And you saw the Williamsburg, you saw the Yorktown recordings. And we go to these historical sites because we know that there's a hidden history that's there. Of course, they have the public history and stuff they're finding out all the time, like you'll hear with this Jamestown tour that I've also edited down for your viewing consumption because it went on a while. I've had to shorten it a bit because this guy went on. He was excellent, by the way. Mm-hmm. The tour guide was absolutely excellent and was actually starting to defy some of the more established, well-known things, or people what they think are well-known. One of the greater points that was brought up about Jamestown was, in the regular history, was the fact they thought for a long time it was in the water, it was lost to history. That's somebody out there basically saying they don't want you to look there. And also they don't want to admit they were wrong on something. You just easily redact some things. And the truth is the truth till a better truth comes along. And that's exactly what they're doing. I did notice a slight lack of other information that was brought up. The man Thomas West was brought up, like in the other recording you'll hear. But it was also not as extensive as before with that. So what I will do currently is we'll, right at this breaker point here, we're going to put in the rest of those recordings. I'm sorry for the length, but we're adding in all of it in one chunk for context. So here you are.
Good. Wonderful. This is my first day back to work after my training at the Grand Canyon. So I'm excited to be back and also exhausted, but I'm super excited to have you all here today. So welcome. My name is Tanya, and I'm a park ranger here at Colonial National Historical Park. And here at Colonial, we preserve the sights and stories of Jamestown Island and Yorktown battlefield. So Yorktown is 23 miles away from us, and it's the location of the last major battle of the Revolutionary War. But here at Jamestown, you're known as the first permanent English settlement. So take a look around. This is the piece of land that the colonists decided to plant their settlement. So what do you think would entice someone to come here to this location? A lot of water. All right, so we have the waterway, the James River directly behind you. What else? Nice flat piece of land, maybe for development. Anything else come to mind? So when the colonists arrived to Virginia, they first arrived what we know now as the Virginia Beach area. But that's not where they wanted to plant their settlement because they wanted to be protected. Their main concern is that the Spanish would find their colony. So their goal was to move upriver, to explore the waterways, and determine the best place for their settlement. So they traveled another 2 weeks or so, and they determined that this was the best location. That's because this area provided a deep water port, so that waterway that you're talking about was very important. And in this specific location, the ships were able to tie off right to land, allowing transportation of people and goods a lot easier. Because if you didn't have that deep water port, you need to have a smaller ship to bring folks over to land. Also, this was an area that was easily defensible. What that means is that the way that this island kind of juts down into the James gives you a good view of the waterway, so you can see if any enemy ships are approaching. And they're also going to build the very well-known triangular fort shortly after arriving. So if you turn over to your left here, you're going to see that triangular fort, and it outlines the exact footprint of the original fort that was constructed in 1607. Good morning, come join us. Yeah, absolutely. And last reason they chose this location is because they did not see any people, they did not see any structures. They thought they could claim this land for themselves. What they would later learn is that this land was part of Paspahegh territory. And the Paspahegh lived about 6 miles from where we're located. And so although they did not live here, this was used as their seasonal hunting grounds. And so this is going to create some early tension between the Paspahegh and the English as the English continued to encroach on indigenous territory. And I do have an artist depiction here of what that first settlement's going to look like. I'm hoping y'all can help me describe it. What are some things that you see within this image? Here it is. Walls. The fortification itself, yeah, this triangular fortification. So the way that we know where the fort is located is because archaeologists were continuously excavating this area. And in 1994, they uncovered the footprint of this fort, and it was in the form of soil stains. So each place where you see one of these logs in place, there was once, again, a log there that rotted over time and left behind a circular stain. And it's almost like playing connect the dots. So each place where that log was located is going to leave a mark, allowing you to find the outline of the fort itself, which allowed us to recreate the fort that you see today. What else do you see within this image?
Large central structure.
Yep, so that large structure here in the very middle is the church, and it's surrounded by smaller structures. So this is where the colonists would have lived during those earlier years. We also know some of the activities taking place within these buildings. For instance, we know that there was a blacksmith shop. That's because we found evidence of different tools and metals where that blacksmith was working. I'd also like to point out the bulwarks, the half-moon shapes at each corner here. That's where artillery would be placed, because again, the main concern is that the Spanish would find this fortification, so they wanted to make sure the fort was defended. So by having the bulwarks here, that gives you again a great view of the James River, so you can see any ships that are approaching. What's going to happen though during these earlier years, it's really going to be all about survival. When the colonists were coming here, they were hoping to find riches, they were hoping to find gold, they were also hoping to find a quicker route to Asia. They thought that there would be a waterway that cuts through what we know now as the United States. They did not find either of those things. And what's really going to fuel the economy here is tobacco. But that's not until a little bit later, because the main goal during those earlier years happens to be survival. Within that first year, less than 40 of the 104 men and boys are going to survive. And the only reason there's a continuous population here is because England keeps on sending more colonists along. So during those earlier years, the colonists are going to experience disease, warfare, as well as starvation. But eventually they will get on their feet, they will be able to stabilize this colony, and they're going to expand beyond the fortification. And this is an artist's depiction of the expansion beyond the fort. and the focus of our program today. So what you are looking at now is the expansion into Newtown, and that's this area over here to your right. So take a look across this landscape. It's quite challenging to imagine what this land was once like because there's not too many clues out there. But if you take a look across the landscape, is there anything that might indicate that there was once development?
All the ditches.
Yep, so we see the ditches and mounds. So ditches and mounds were used to line roads as well as establish property boundaries. So in this area known as Newtown, there are two main streets. There is Back Street and the highway along the water. Back Street would be more of a residential area where the wealthy merchants would have their homes. And parallel to that, towards the James River, is the highway along the water. So that's where more of the port activities would take place. What else do you see out there? Anything else? We have the ditches and mounds. What about those brick foundations? Does everyone see those? So the brick foundations outline the exact footprint of structures that were there during the colonial period. But those structures that you see are from the 1950s. That's because archaeologists were out here excavating and they were uncovering these original foundations and removing the artifacts. But they realized if they left the foundations exposed to the wind and the rain, they would deteriorate. So what they did is they backfilled the site, so covered up the foundations with dirt, and built this representation above the surface for visitors to have an understanding of what was once there. So anywhere that you see one of these brick foundations, that area has been excavated. And again, you can see that expansion into Newtown, and I can pass this around a little bit later so you can take a closer look. What I find very interesting is that this area known as Newtown did not consistently develop over time. Instead, it was quite sporadic. And we really see that through the artifacts that have been uncovered at the site. So I have an artifact here that has been uncovered in the thousands across this landscape. And I'm hoping y'all can help me describe it. So what color is this?
White.
What shape is it? The cylinder. And then can y'all tell me up here, is it solid or does it have a hole going through it?
Hole going through.
Perfect. There's a hole going through the entire length of this artifact. I can give you a couple more clues. This here is broken off on one end, and I can also tell that it's made out of clay. So I want you to think for a moment, what could this artifact be? I'd like you to raise your hand nice and high if you got it correct. It is indeed a tobacco pipe. As I mentioned earlier, tobacco is going to be the main crop that's going to fuel this economy here, and tobacco pipes are found in thousands across this landscape. And I don't think we found one intact. So again, we're going to find broken pieces of this artifact, and typically it's the pipe stem preserved a little bit better than the pipe bowl. And what the archaeologists realized during the earlier years is that the bore size, the way that they're made, they change over time. So bore holes made during the earlier years are larger compared to ones that are made a little bit closer to our time frame here. And so that creates a chronology for this artifact. So if you're able to measure the size of the bore, and the archaeologists can date this give or take 25 years, I'm now better able to understand this landscape and how it was used. Because more artifacts from the same time period tells you more activity is taking place there. And instead of seeing a sporadic distribution of artifacts across the landscape, we see clusters during certain time periods, telling us certain areas are more heavily used than others. So what I'd like to do today is explore two areas where we see a lot of development taking place in Newtown. So we're going to head over into this area known as Governor Harvey's property. But before we do that, I would like us to think about our own communities and how they have changed over time. So I'd like you to first think of the place you have lived the longest, and then second, what is one way it has changed over time? So if you'd like to continue your journey into Newtown with me, you can either head down these stairs, and I'm going to go down the ramp and meet you at the base of the stairs. All right, as I mentioned, I'm taking you to the places where we see a lot of development here at Jamestown. So take a look around. Do you see it? Not quite. I just see a nice forested landscape and then mowed grass. I don't see any indications of development out here. But that's because evidence to this lies beneath the surface. It's through the archaeology that we can better understand what this landscape was used for. But before we dig into that, let's think about our own communities and how they have changed over time and what this development looks like. So for myself, I grew up in Western Pennsylvania and my family still lives there. And every time I go home, there always seems to be more road construction. So they're expanding the highways to accommodate more people traveling through my community. So that's a change that I've noticed. How about you? What changes have you noticed in your communities? Larger homes? Absolutely. Anything else?
Larger emphasis placed on entertainment.
All right, so different types of entertainment.
Family entertainment, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Better roads? Oh, perfect.
More stores.
More stores.
From agriculture to industrial.
All right, so more industrial areas taking over what was maybe once agricultural lands. So just like your own communities, Jamestown is going to change over time as well. And it's really spearheaded by the person that's in charge. So where we are standing now is known as Governor Harvey's property. And Governor Harvey was in charge around the 1630s, so about 23 years after the development of that triangular fort. And so Governor Harvey, he realized that there was too much focus on tobacco, and that could be a bad thing for the economy. Because what happens if there's a bad crop season? What happens when the price of tobacco fluctuates? So what he decides to do is he wants to have a variety of industries. So he puts out a call for artisans to practice their crafts here, and he builds this up into an industrial area. So I do have an artist depiction of what this area once looked like, and this is based off of the archaeological evidence. So again, you'd really have to use your imagination without seeing this image here to determine what this area once looked like. So within this image, you can see the governor's home. On the far side over here, it was said to be the finest of them all during that time period. As the governor, he would also host prominent people who were traveling to Jamestown. In the very back, we can see a kiln as well as a pit, and this is where the colonists are digging to get to the natural clay so they could use it and fire it up to make bricks. Not only does this tell us about the activity of brick making, it now shows us the mindset of the colonists that were once here over hundreds of years ago, because these colonists are really investing in this area. Those first homes were just wooden structures. They were posted in the ground. They're not going to last as long because they're going to be exposed to bugs, and they're also going to rot. But with having brick foundations, it's going to lift those wooden structures off the ground, allowing them to last a little bit longer. And eventually we'll have our first all-brick structure around 1638. So we can see the development of this community over time and how the structures are changing. Also, there's this small building over here. This is where a brewer and apothecary would work. If you'd like to pass that around. So that brewer is going to make beer for the colony, and beer is going to be the main drink that's consumed during this time period. There's a lot of issues with water contamination. You definitely don't want to be drinking that James River because it's brackish. It's a mix of fresh and salt water. And the colonists would dig wells here, but eventually they would get contaminated or inundated with that salty water. So this beer is actually going to be safer to drink than the water that's available. And that apothecary, they're going to be represented by the artifacts that have been uncovered in this area. So the one I have in my hand is a replica, but we do have the actual artifacts inside of our exhibit area in the museum. So what you are looking at here is a piece of an apothecary jar or a drug jar. So these would have traveled over with the colonists. They would have been filled with ointments, herbs, and medicines, and they would keep on reusing these jars until they eventually break. So again, you can see that this is a broken piece of what it once was, and this is typically what we find in archaeological records. Very similar to my tobacco pipe, right? It was just a piece of what it once was. So these are items that were lost, forgotten about, and sometimes it's just the plain trash that's left behind. And we're using these clues to understand what life was once like. Sometimes archaeologists can even do a residue analysis on these actual jars that were uncovered during excavations to determine the exact materials that were once in here. But those apothecaries are not only trying to treat the colonists here who are sick, they're exploring these natural resources to see how they can be used for medicinal purposes and also shipping them back to England. Because the name of the game here is to make a profit. So having that common brewer is now kind of forcing people within a certain proximity to come to the common brewer instead of making their own brew in their own home. And having that apothecary, again, they're able to ship these different resources back to England that may not be available there. So again, they're trying to generate revenue with these different types of industries. So this area will flourish for about a 10-year period, but it's said that Governor Harvey was maybe not the most personable, because there's actually a point in time where the colonists overthrow him and he heads back to England, but he's told to return to Jamestown. And by the end of this 10-year period, the governor will be bankrupt, he will need to sell off his land, and he will head back to England. So although this area was once flourishing, we're going to see a decline after this individual is no longer governor. And I'd say a handful of years after that, this area is going to be mostly abandoned. But there will be another governor with a new vision, and we're going to see that development take place over time. Again, that's why we see the peaks of development and periods of decline as people are in these different roles and as the vision for Jamestown changes over time. But the main thing is to mostly urbanize this area and bring more people to the city center. So what we're going to do next, we're going to travel a little bit further in time along this path, and then we're going to head to our left. So if you'd like to continue, please follow me to our last stop. All right, so we're traveling a little bit further in time. We started in 1607 with the recreated triangular fort. We traveled to the 1630s, where Governor Harvey's property turned into an industrial area. And now we're around the 1660s, so about 53 years after the development of that triangular fort. And as I mentioned, the structure that you see here represents the outline of a colonial structure, but is not the original structure itself. That still lies beneath the surface. But I'm hoping you all can help me describe this. If we were on the phone chatting with one another and I could not see the structure, how would you describe it to me? What does it look like? What is it made out of? Brick. Okay, what else?
Water.
Got mortar.
Separated into sections.
All right, why do you say that?
Well, it's got kind of almost rooms.
Yep, so we have dividing walls in between the structure. Anything else we'd like to add?
Chimneys.
Chimney, so we got something going on in the middle of these units as well. So what you are looking at here is a row home, and there are 4 separate units. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And like row homes today, these are supposed to be used as individuals' personal homes. But what we learned through historic documentation is that one of these units over here was actually used as the county jail. So that can tell us a few things. Maybe it's more challenging to find individuals to live in these homes than anticipated. A lot of people want to live out in the countryside where they can have larger plots of land to grow tobacco. This urbanized city center here, you're not going to have as large of a piece of land, so that's not going to allow you to cultivate that crop. Also, these 2 units here were built with public money, so because they were used with the public money, they thought if they could not fill this unit, maybe they could convert it for a different purpose. And converting this to a jail tells us crime is being committed here at Jamestown. Also, through the archaeological evidence, we learned that some of these units here were burned to the ground. And that's most likely to Bacon's rebellion in 1676, when Nathaniel Bacon, a young man who was sent here by his father, was granted land out in the countryside. And Nathaniel, being further out in the countryside, was experiencing different relations with indigenous peoples because we have 2 different mindsets taking place here. We have the English who believe this land is theirs to claim to expand for England, but then we have the indigenous peoples who are being pushed off their own homeland. And so that's creating a lot of tension as the English continue to encroach on indigenous territory. So the further you are away from the city center, the more tension there's going to be. So what happens is that, again, there's a lot of hostility taking place in these locations. And Nathaniel Bacon wants the governor during this time, Governor Berkeley, to take aggressive action towards the indigenous peoples, but the governor will not do that. He's trying to put peace treaties together, and also with this, he has a hand in the fur trade, so it's probably better to have good relations with indigenous peoples. But he does decide that he will put outposts in the countryside to protect the colonists who are out there. But with this protection comes higher taxes. And the colonists aren't too pleased about that. And so they decide to take things into their own hands. Nathaniel will decide to attack some indigenous groups along with some other colonists, and the governor will determine that they are rebels. Nathaniel does not like this very much, and he's able to gather a mob of individuals, about couple hundred or so, to come to Jamestown and storm this area. They will be able to push the governor off this land. He will flee across that James River, and the colonists will take over this area and burn most of it to the ground. And so this rebellion will last about a month or so, and then Nathaniel will die of natural causes. And once he is no longer around, the rebellion will start to dwindle because he is the one really spearheading these efforts. And with that, the governor will be able to regain control. Many of those rebels will head back to their home, and some of them will be killed because they will be determined to be rebels against the governor here. So once they're able to regain control, Jamestown will be slowly rebuilt, but now it's setting the tone for this to no longer be the capital. And then it'll be in 1699 that the capital will change from Jamestown over to Williamsburg, but this land will not completely be abandoned. In the 1750s, this land will be used as plantation land by two owners. We have the Ambler family mansion, so if you walk down this path here, you can see the structure that's above the surface. That is the Ambler family's structure there. And along the Island Drive loop, which is out towards our parking lot, that's where the Travis family lived. And this will be used as plantation land. So the area's history will continue on. In present day, this is an active archaeological site as well as part of the National Park Service. So we are able to protect this land, and our partners, Jamestown Rediscovery, they conduct excavations pretty much Monday through Friday, always unearthing new information and artifacts to the site here. So with more artifacts that we uncover, the more information we're able to gather and determine the various stories that have taken place here. But although this place has been set aside by the American people because of its importance in our history, I also hope you remember your own hometowns have stories and community as well. So I'm reminded again of my hometown in western Pennsylvania as being an old coal mining town, because all of our homes look exactly alike because they were once built for the coal miners who lived there. Also down the road, there's a bunch of old rusty buildings that represent that industry, giving me glimpses of the past. So not only do we have history here at Jamestown, and we're uncovering it through the artifacts, remember that your own communities have history as well. So I hope not only do you find a story here that connects with you, I also hope that you return home with a new lens and see what stories your own community tells. So I definitely encourage you all to continue along this path here. I'd say it's about a half a mile if you do the entire Newtown loop. And if you'd like to join at 11 o'clock for a Jamestown history tour, you'll meet at the Tercentennial Monument where we began our program, and they'll likely take you inside the fort for that program. So thank you so much for joining me today, and if you have any questions, feel free to come up and chat. Y'all enjoy. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Right at 11, we've got a couple more victims walking with purpose. Wait for the cue. Don't jump the queue. You know what to do. And you better be loud, because you seem to express a strong interest in this exciting opportunity. This is the final call for the 11 o'clock Jamestown walking tour. As you approach the benches, you can hear the roar of the excited crowd. That's what I'm talking about. Happy Memorial Day, or Labor Day.
Did they move any faster?
No, they're going to walk on by. As I said, they want no part of it. And it allows me to separate the chaff from the grain. The ones that really want to do this, that really are committed. It's the reason I use that word. Make sure I have my slideshow ready. Final call! Stop looking behind you, walk this way. Final call for the 11 o'clock Jamestown walking tour. My guess is that there will be some folks that will come along, and we'll catch them up as we're working and walking from place to place. Good morning, folks.
Good morning.
Thank you all so much for coming out to historic Jamestown. My name is Willie Balderson, and I have the pleasure to serve as the Director of Living History and Historic Trades for the Jamestown Rediscovery Foundation that has for the last 29 years been engaged in an excavation of the site of the first permanent English settlement in British North America. And that site is right over there. But up until 29 years ago, there was a popular belief that that site had eroded away into the James River with a known quantity of land, at least 25 acres off of this leading southern edge of the island. 400 years ago, when the English arrived here, 1607, they wrote that the channel runs right against the shore, that they had 6 fathoms of water. English fathom, 1600, is 6 feet. They've got 6 feet times 6, 36 feet of draft for those ships, ocean-going ships. That's a lot. And they thought that was just the best thing. They wouldn't have to use what are called flies, ships' boats, to shuttle the stuff that they needed to bring ashore. The channel was right against the shore. That channel is still out there today. Right here, basically where the fort is, it's about the length of an American football field, 100 yards out. 400 years ago, there's a sloping bank that surrendered to lots of trees, bald cypress amongst them predominantly, shaping that flat plain that probably at a really high tide would flood. But they wrote that the channel was right against the shore. Any folks want to join us for our 11 o'clock walking tour? We're going to spend, because it's hot, I'll probably spend 20 minutes here and then take you over into the shade, talk a little bit about the investment of the English there, and then move over to another spot in the fort, maybe for 6 minutes in the sun. Admittedly, I'm a cruel man. And then move you beyond to conclude through the west gate of the fort under some huge trees over there, nice benches. How's that for a plan? Good, good, thank you. Now, I have some folks that have arrived, and I'm going to challenge you again. Those of you that are native Virginians, you are disqualified from answering. But the question I put to the rest of you is, if you can recall back to when you were in the 4th grade, if you grew up in the United States, 4th grade, you got your state's history where you grew up. 5th grade, you got U.S. history. And it always started, that first chapter, the age of exploration. And you learn about the Spanish investment into what is today the continental United States with Coronado in the 1540s, coming up out of northern Mexico into Texas, looking for the 7 cities of gold. You learned about probably Ponce de Leon down in what is today Florida, the Fountain of Youth, and the establishment of St. Augustine, 1565, the first permanent Spanish settlement in what is today the continental United States. Probably Ornate was next, 1598, coming out of the Baja Peninsula into what is Arizona and largely New Mexico, laying the groundwork for what would be that series of missions against the West Coast. And then he finally got to the English. But I would bet you, for most of you, if you think back, the establishment shot that you learned of the English coming across the ocean to what is today the United States, it was 1620 and the Pilgrims, right? Raise those turkey legs high, come on. We got like 2.5 months till Thanksgiving, right? And I'm going to be talking till I'm blue in the face about 1607, 8, 9, 10, and the establishment of the first permanent English settlement, British North America. 13 years before the Pilgrims. It's right there. Most of our guests, most Americans don't know about it. 13 years after they establish here, the Pilgrims will arrive at Plymouth Rock, and by that point, along the James River here, there are no less than 22 settlements. I will conclude at the end of our class over on the west side of the fort, under those benches, or not under those benches. I'm worried about you, sir, because I know you've already admitted you start early. But on those benches, under those big trees, and I'll explain and unpack why. Now, I've got a challenge because I've asked an hour. I'd ask you to give me till 12:15. So it's a hot hour right now. I'm going to keep you as comfortable as I can. You should know a little bit about me to legitimize this or further frighten you, depending on your mindset. I'm a native Virginian. I grew up about 60 miles from here in the northern neck of Virginia. I grew up with an understanding that my family, the Baldersons, my ancestor, a great name, Ebenezer Balderson. Yeah, he was an indentured servant, a very wealthy man in the northern neck. One of the carters that basically was the proprietor, the Lord Proprietor, delving out land to new colonists for the northern neck of Virginia, between the Rappahannock and the Potomac River. And my ancestor started my family being in Richmond County, Virginia, completely different from Richmond City, which is up this river about 60 miles. But Richmond County, I'm the 8th generation to live in Richmond County, or at least grow up there. I've since moved to a different county. But I was just imbued with this sense of place. And I became very interested in Virginia history as a little kid. And by the time I got to the 4th grade, we got our state's history, I determined I was going to become a high school history teacher. Had it all laid out in the 5th and 6th grade. And then I got to high school, folks, and it just crashed and burned. Because I learned if you taught high school history, this was in 1968, you taught high school history, you also coached track. Or baseball, or football. Give it to coach, he's got that. And I was decimated because I wanted to focus on history. And at this very same time, I had a chance to work for a small radio station, a commercial station, small market. They wanted a high school kid to work the request line at night because none of the daytime announcers in 1972 wanted to listen to little kids request Donny Osmond records. That's honest to God's truth. So I got this job, and it set my frame of reference. I went to college in 1974, studied journalism, and the summer of 1976, I had a chance to work for the National Park Service. I had suppressed this love of history, and yet I was still reading primary sources because I was a geek, you know? And I knew a lot of background information about what the subject matter was at the national park where I was to work. And then I was invited back for a second interview, and they said, okay, you need to be able to lift 40 pounds, and I did it. And they said, all right, now the only other thing, we're going to give you diaries and letters. We want you to portray someone from the past. And I thought, boy, that's a great way to teach history. I never thought about that. And I was very enthusiastic about that. And then they said, now the only other thing, you're going to be working all summer. Yeah, I got that. What's the worst that can happen? And he said, and you're going to be wearing wool clothes all summer in Virginia. My new friends, that was 47 years ago. And for every summer since then, I've worn wool clothes all summer in Virginia. And for the last 38 years, I've worn wool and armor all summer. If you'd been out here yesterday, you would have met this guy. Oh yeah. Any of you were out yesterday? I was out inside that fort for 6.5 hours in wool and armor and had a great time portraying someone that had explored the Chesapeake Bay with Captain John Smith in 1608, talking about interactions with the native people. And it was a great day for armor. Let me tell you, there was a breeze off the river. After college, I started a business with 3 other fellows I'd met at the park up in Richmond, designing living history programs for small museums. My first big contract was with the Park Service here at Jamestown to hire, train, costume, and monitor interpreters that would lead tours as characters. That led to 27 years working for Colonial Williamsburg. The better part of that was hiring and working to train folks that would portray famous and not famous dead people. It was a good living, it's a good gig. But I kept coming back since I was a little kid to my interest in this place. In 2016, I took an early retirement and was gainfully retired for 8.5 hours. My old boss from Colonial Williamsburg had come out to lead the archaeologists, and he wanted me to continue work that I'd been doing through Colonial Williamsburg beginning in 2010 of developing a historics trade program and a living history program. Today we've got a blacksmith at the site of the earliest datable, documentable English blacksmith shop in English North America. Dates to 1608. We did the archaeology in 2006. Pretty exciting. And the stuff that he can talk to you about will amaze you. I know it will. For my own part, I'm going to lead you around just another minute or two. Give these folks a chance to get over here if they want. I don't know if you've been noticing. People are filing in and some are setting down. Those of you that have arrived since I greeted everybody, you're welcome. So happy to have you here. So let me kind of establish some common denominators. Fill in the blank for me. Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. Everybody remember that? What country sent Columbus, Cristobal Colon? Spain. To prove the earth was round? Oh no. Learned men of his time, regardless of how it pushed against the edicts of the church, that would be the Catholic Church, learned men were convinced the earth wasn't flat, it was round. And what Columbus really set out to do was find a route to the Indies. Because of a fellow named Marco Polo and several other Europeans, they had discovered you could walk across Europe, across Asia, to Cathay. Walk and come back. It took about 5 years. But if you could sail to the west and come back in a year, wow! Columbus made 4 voyages. And each of those voyages he penetrated a little bit further into the Caribbean rim. And each time he brought back better news of the resources. And by 1519, again, we're talking about the springboard, 1492. But by 1519, a commander named Cortez will lead conquistadors against Montezuma and the Aztecs. And they will be successful. They truly will. And the wealth that will come out of that area of what is today central Mexico, gold, largely, precious stones, medicinal, culinary, herbs, spices, plants, exotic, animals, exotic to the Europeans. They're trying to figure out a way to get them quickly back across to the old world. And they discover very quickly that there is this sweet spot in the ocean right off the coast, the east coast of Florida and the west coast of those islands that make up the Bahamas. We take it for granted today. Well, it's the Bahama Channel, but that current that they discovered is called the Gulf Stream. And they discovered if you could successfully negotiate those shoals in the Bahama Channel, once you're beyond those against what is today really Georgia, southern Georgia, you would be catapulted up against the east coast, around the middle part of the Atlantic, and back to a lesser extent, Portugal, but Spain. It was perfect. It was perfect. And they use it. But what happens if those treasure fleets that start to form, safety in numbers, to get that material back to Spain? What happens if one of the ships, the flux capacitor blows, you know? Something happens and they need to find a safe harbor. Yeah, that's exciting, I know. I feel the same way. Steady, Fluffy, steady. Dog's excited about all of this. They discovered the Chesapeake Bay. Chesapeake Bay is the largest natural bay in the world. They don't make that notation. But they discovered this large bay is actually a series of small bays, safe havens. They encounter the indigenous people. We know from the archaeology of this region, that native people have been in this region for at least 12,500 years. So there are native people looking at these ships coming into the bay as they're attempting to repair it. The Spanish are, these ships. You've seen the movies where the ships are coming up a river and the Indians are hiding behind the trees looking. That's a bunch of crap. At least when you're referencing Virginia in the late 16th and 17th century. For this reason, the Chesapeake Bay begins to be mentioned in the Spanish accounts in the mid-1540s. And it begins at that same time to appear on their charts. They call it the Bay of Santa Maria. And it is a haven if your flux capacitor blows. Yeah, if you, for some reason, you have to pull over. They write about the indigenous people and the interaction, that they are very ingenious. They make things out of stone. They're very crafty. They're self-sufficient. Translated today, hunters and gatherers. Yeah. And they welcome trade with you. And the thing they want more than anything are not baubles, glass beads, and brass bells. That always is the default. But the thing they really want are iron tools. Now, you know, we think, all right, they're going to trade with them for grubbing hoes. And they do. But the thing is, the grubbing hoes aren't going to be used necessarily for agrarian purposes. Any war that's fought from the time that women have chronicled war, it's been over some resource. And in this case, territory, if you have superior weapons, you can command the day. Econ 101. I hated the course and I had to take it. And I took it and I aced it. But it's a whole new language. One of the few things I remember from economics from 40 years ago was that if you have a bundle of money and you're going down a road and you get to a Y, that is, you could invest that money here or there. And say you invest it here and you double your investment. That's great, but you never, ever just rest knowing that was a great investment. You always have to consider what you didn't do, and that better informs you of your next opportunity. It's called the opportunity cost. The native people, make no mistake, are processing these interactions as opportunity costs. And what is the cost, you say, to the indigenous people? Well, we also have accounts from the French, the Dutch, the Spanish, the Portuguese, and the English, as they become better acquainted with the native population, that the Indians write that 3 weeks after there was a visit, a third of the tribe mysteriously died. And you don't think that the locals note that? And they process it. Well, why? Well, what happened? And what was the only interruption in their lives? Were those people coming and visiting. Now, for some of these chiefs, the next time that ships arrive, maybe they're going to be willing to trade. Even though, I mean, these are polytheists. They're worshiping everything around them, nativish. And they're getting their cues for how they live their lives from the displeasure that they see manifest in all sorts of things. Enemies that suddenly appear to attack them. Weather patterns that change that they don't understand. But they process everything and they react to it. And their priests and conjurers are saying these people are bad news, but the chief might be in a position where I only want a few more grubbing hoes or axes or hatchets, and we will have a superiority over our neighbor. There are opportunity costs that are never written down from the native viewpoint because the natives don't leave a written language. So we have to dissect how the Europeans react to what goes on. They'll stop by and visit. They get along marvelously well. Same ship's captain 3 years later goes back. They're a little hesitant, but they establish trade. Third time they come back, it's not charmed. And half the landing party is attacked and killed. And they don't come back anymore. A lot of ethno-historians, anthropologists, write it off that these people are processing the interaction and the loss that is incurred on the tribe. Some chiefs are willing to incur some minimal loss for a while to gain an advantage. That's a lot to process. But it will affect how the English get along with the locals here. And it will have a devastating effect on the English that come here. How am I doing? Is this all right? I had some heavy stuff. I'll try to keep it buoyed up. But understanding that reaction, interaction, is so important. It's a huge part of the story of the success and failure that occurred right over there. Now, you did really well with Columbus. Anybody heard of a fellow named Sir Walter Raleigh? Sir Walter Raleigh? No? Walter Raleigh threw the velvet, some say it's a silk cape over, I'm a native Virginian, the mud hole, as Queen Elizabeth is going to walk over, and she suddenly becomes infatuated with him. He becomes a courtier. It's not quite like that, but it's a great story. But Sir Walter Raleigh would become one of Queen Elizabeth's favorites. She grants to Walter Raleigh's half-brother a patent, the permission, with the Queen's seal, to plant a colony somewhere along the eastern seaboard, and he picks further north, kind of toward where Martha's Vineyard is today. But unfortunately, in 1583, as he's going back to England, his ship, small ship, called the Squirrel, is lost in a storm, and so is Walter Raleigh's half-brother. News gets back to London. Raleigh petitions Queen Elizabeth for permission to continue that patent. He's granted it. 1584, he will send 2 ships and 100 folks, not up where his half-brother had been investing, but in what is today the Outer Banks of North Carolina, Roanoke Island. 1584, they are to reconnoiter, and they do. For 2 months, they take 2 of the native people from that region back to London. They live with Sir Walter Raleigh, the winter, 1584-85. Raleigh hires the leading mathematician of the period, Thomas Harriot, spoke 5 languages, renowned astronomer, mathematician. He's a thinker. He will stay with these 2 Indians and write a phonology, teach them how to speak English. And they teach him their native language. And in 1585, Raleigh sends Thomas Harriot, those 2 native men, and a fellow named John White, a watercolorist, back over. With 100 soldiers, they will winter 1585-86 on Roanoke Island. They are to do all they can to learn as much new as they can. The painter will draw the earliest surviving images of Central East Coast native people, 1585-86. Those images, really small format, close to 80 of them survive, and they are at the British Museum. You can see them next time you're in London. So, things won't go well on this second investment, for those 100 soldiers will live in the Chesapeake Outer Banks region the winter, 1585-86. Half of them come up to the Chesapeake Bay, and they hear about this chief who has 6 tribes under his thumb. Very powerful. But they are met with very friendly Indians. Who doesn't like to go to Virginia Beach, you know? The Chesapeakeans, they're called there. They accommodate the English, they write, very well. Meanwhile, the 50 that stayed down around Roanoke go up the Albemarle Sound, run into conflict with the chief that had been friendly to him. That opportunity cost, the maximization of it, There's a firefight just as the 50 that are coming back from the Chesapeake arrive. That former friendly chief is killed. It sets off a series of fights, and the only thing that saves those 100 men is a fellow named Sir Francis Drake, who's promised Raleigh when he headed out the year before to attack the Spanish treasure fleets in the Caribbean, that after he was successful, no boasting there, he knew he would be, but he promised Raleigh he'd swing by Roanoke and check on the folks, and he arrives just as things are coming unraveled. He takes those 100 men back to London, rescues them. 3 weeks later, Raleigh's supply to those men arrive. And they're clueless as to what happened. They leave 15 men to hold the fort in an area that was incredibly hostile, and then go back. Raleigh's incensed that all that has happened, particularly the disintegration of the relationship with those Indians down there, and he says the next year, 1587, I'm going to send men, women, and several children that will be born on the voyage over. He doesn't really write those into the contract. But I'm going to plant the colony in 1587, and he does. But the instructions to the admiral, swing by Roanoke Island, pick up the 15 men, oh boy, but then take everybody up to the much more favorable Chesapeake. The only problem is that the ship's captain, the admiral of the fleet of 3 ships that brings those folks over, only took that job, so he could get back to this side of the Atlantic, because he wants to dump those people off and see if he can't find a couple of stray ships from Spanish treasure fleets. Storm is tearing up, a nor'easter, as they arrive, and why they attempted to send a landing party ashore in that nor'easter, nobody knows, but they do. 2 of the ship's boats, the flies flip over. One of the pilots drowns, several of the sailors drown, and the captain, the admiral of the 3 ships, uses that as the excuse to say, I'm dumping everybody here. The lost colonists, as they will come to be known, weren't supposed to be left at Roanoke Island. They were supposed to be brought to Chesapeake. But that's what the admiral of the ship calls for. And then he goes down and attacks and finds, captures a Spanish ship, pretty wealthy ship, and it's always easier to ask forgiveness than permission. He gets back to London. Look what I brought you. Raleigh's incensed. Why did you leave them where you weren't supposed to? Well, it was the weather thing. Raleigh immediately goes to Queen Elizabeth. I need 2 ships to rescue my people. And Queen Elizabeth says, no. The Spanish are preparing a fleet, an armada, to attack England, which does play in 1588, which is why it's 3 years before Raleigh can finally send that supply. And by then, what do they come back to say? They're lost. Now, if you're an Englishman, an English gentlewoman, an English of low birth, everybody processes this as a national tragedy. The Spanish hand over fist gold and silver and jewels out of New Spain, and the English, forgive me, English ain't got squat. But it's 20 years before the English will try again. Queen Elizabeth dies in 1603. Her cousin, James VI of Scotland, James I of England, ascends the throne, and the first thing he does is reach out to the Spanish through channels. And he negotiates a treaty that's signed in 1605. King James of England, will surrender any English claims to what is today South America, Central America, and North America, as far up the East Coast as just below Wilmington, North Carolina. You all can have that. King James further says, I will no longer allow the likes of Sir Francis Drake, that by now is dead, John Hawkins, to attack your treasure fleet. They will be held accountable. 6 months later, a group of investors, merchants from London and Bristol, England, go to the king and say, hey, we want to pick the ball up and try to colonize again. What do you think King James is going to say? No, I just signed a treaty. And the officers of the company said, Your Majesty, all we want is permission to start a company. You see how I do that? Because the company, you will empower us, allow us to sell shares of stock that will realize the money to lease ships, buy supplies, arms and armor to defend us, the company's interest, but you won't have a hand in it. And if the ambassador from Spain goes to you and says, have you sent Ingles to settle? What does he say? I don't know anything about this. I just let him start a company. And folks, that's exactly what happened when the English ambassador, I beg your pardon, the Spanish ambassador gets an audience in 1607 and asks King James, have you sent people? No, I don't know a thing about it. And he lied through his teeth. Because he promised the Spanish he wouldn't send and plant a colony. And he didn't. They are going to be well above Wilmington, North Carolina. And the thing that made it sweet for King James says, of all the wealth that you realize, and they are all of those countries of Europe at this point, Western Europe and Britain, they're all looking at the New World the same way. The New World is the New World is the New World to the south of the Chesapeake. They all call it New Spain. And all they see is, well, it's not dollar signs, it would be pound signs. But they're seeing wealth, gold and silver. And they've got it in their heads that they're going to find it here. That is how this settlement was set in motion. By November of 1606, they've sold way more shares of stock than they anticipated. They've leased 3 ships, bought supplies, and let me tell you, they are ready. They are ready. They determined to depart in December. So they'll make the passage over the winter and arrive in Virginia, the Chesapeake, in the spring to plant wheat and barley, which will allow them to become self-sufficient. Whatever you do, one of the instructions, do not upset, just paraphrase, the native population, because as they come to embrace you with love, and you with them with love, they will eventually show you where the gold and silver is. If there's a drought, and you have shown them with love, and they you, in times of drought, they will share their victuals with you. Folks, what could possibly go wrong here? It sounds just halcyon, doesn't it? They have a plan that it's only going to take them 12 weeks to make the entire crossing down the Thames, out into the Channel, which in the winter and the summer as well, always has a headwind prevailing from the west, and they have to tack against that in the Channel to even get out into the middle North Atlantic, then drop down against the west coast of France, of Africa, past the entrance to the Mediterranean Sea, around the Caribbean, try to negotiate enemy territory. Basically, almost all at this point of the Caribbean is in the hands of the Spanish. There are a small number of French islands that have been claimed, but largely it's all Spanish. Successfully negotiate all that, and they're going to arrive. It's going to take them 12 weeks. So they've got 12 weeks of food and potable water, and a supply of food for the mariners to get back. But they know they can catch that Gulf Stream, and it'll be much faster going back. They depart the 19th of December, 105 men and boys to be planted. That's also going to disintegrate very quickly. Am I doing okay for you? All right, before we stand up, I'm going to take you over into the fort. I'm going to talk about a little bit about what happens on the voyage, but their arrival here. Look out in the river from where you stand, where you sit. You see that line right there? Very clear. That's shallow. That's where the channel is. That's where the historic channel is. I was hoping that it would calm just a little bit. The forecast was for the wind to drop down a little bit. There it is. And that is where the island terminated 400 years ago. Yeah. Let's walk over into the fort. By the by, there are 6 mating pair of bald eagles on this 1,500-acre island. And the sky is so blue today, they're going to pop. They're cowls, they're white cowls and fans. So you may see them, and if I see one behind you all, I will stop and point it out, and there will be pandemonium and pictures, and I know that. And I'm going to count on somebody, you, to remind me of where I was in the tour. Because there'll be, I know, 30 seconds at least that people want to catch those images. Great. All right, reason I stopped you here is that English will come ashore. I'm jumping ahead. I'll come back and give you a few details. But by 1608, John Smith, the summer of 1608, will go down the James and up the Chesapeake 2 times to explore it. He's going 7 weeks each time. But when he comes back, 7th of September, 3 days later, they write, he's elected the president of the council. He is the man in charge now. And he does 3 things. This is where he first announces to the company at large, but he's speaking directly to the gentlemen. And he is observed as other gentlemen have been the president of the council. They were allowed to maintain the station they held back in England. And if you're a gentleman, who does your work for you? Somebody else. John Smith says, no more. I'm going to build what he calls a commonweal. A commonwealth. Commonwealth, where we will all put into a company store. We will all work harvesting food, gathering food, and in equal turn, we will take out. But he makes it plain, quoting 2 Thessalonians, those that shall not work shall not eat. And how does that go over? Borrowing from another time in history, like the Hindenburg, lamentably. I mean, immediately, if they didn't hate this guy before, some of the gentlemen here, that's it. They go back to the Virginia Company and they complain in the autumn of 1608. And that will lead to just an incredibly horrible winter of 1609-10. It is probably the only other thing that you all have ever heard of about Jamestown, a time called the Starving Time. And I'll come back. So John Smith kind of clears the air in September with the gentlemen. First thing he does. The second thing he does, he orders the digging of the first well inside the fort. We found that well, and for a period, it rendered sweet water. The problem is the island is very much like a piece of Swiss cheese, inundated with brackish water. You can dig down, find a pocket of fresh water, but you've changed the hydraulics. The weight of all that clay kind of kept the brackish water at bay, protecting the sweet water. You move all that clay, could be 2 hours, maybe 2 days. It's not going to be 2 months. Brackish water is going to leach in it. What do you do with a big hole in the middle of the fort? They used it as a trash pit. We recovered over 600,000 objects from that well alone. That is of the now over 4 million objects from largely the earliest several years of the fort. They wrote about what was going on, but up until 29 years, we had no empirical evidence. And we continue 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, to excavate the site. Third thing John Smith did, he orders that the town, the fort, be expanded from 3 sides to 5. We know where the expansion occurred. We know where the first fort was. Where you see our reconstruction, it is slightly offset. Because if you look down, I promise this time I won't sneak up on you. you look straight down, the topsoil they walked on is only 16 inches below you. And we see that topsoil as we excavate, lay out a grid, roughly 16 inches down, and we can see the beige topsoil they walked on. But we also see where they dug through 4 to 6 inches of that beige colored topsoil and hit distinctive red clay. And they pulled out for the fort 3 feet, or actually 2.5 feet of red clay. The posts were set 3 feet down. And then they backfilled. And all the soil that they took out didn't necessarily go back in the order that it came out. So today, when we get down 16 inches, we see the beige colored topsoil, and then we see this red stain where the fort was, where it was backfilled, but a foot wide. And interrupting that stain, if you spritz it with just a little spray from a hose, you see these halos that are dark. They're not all circles, largely. They're halves, pie shapes, 16ths, even really thin slivers of what was the fort that they put in the ground. The wood fiber, the cellulose, with insect damage, moisture, and rot, was reduced to a dark loam, a different type of organic material. John Smith expanded the fort from 3 sides to 5. Our archaeologists found it. Where the north bulwark right there joined the old east wall, they added a line of what they called paling. Don't think of Vladimir the Impaler. Different story. Now, pale is a wall. But they put that, added that impalement where the north bulwark joined the old east wall and headed it toward the east. It terminated just to the west of that big bay bush right there. Where the southeastern bulwark joined the old east wall, right there. They added another line there. And they joined those two right across here with a new east wall. They retained the west wall, that's 1. The river wall, or sometimes they called it the south wall, that's 2. New wall over there is 3. The new east wall is 4. And to restore it back to the north bulwark, 5 sides. We know it. I make mention of this because you're not going to be able to see it or understand it when I get you in, and it will be referenced. Let's walk over into the shade. We doing okay, guys? Yep. Okay, good. You all feel safer now that you're safely within the fort?
Oh yeah, definitely.
People ask us, I hear folks talk about it. Occasionally they'll say, and they can't help it over here, is when you work at a place and you can chuckle. Boy, maybe they ran into a little cash flow problem when they were building the fort. It's got flow-through ventilation. What you see here is based on the archaeology. And again, I don't want to jump ahead. This is an image from the first year of excavating, 1994, right over against the river. Part of that excavation. Trench stain, holes in the ground. Be afraid. Be very afraid. Yeah. Right over there. And again, we have built this reconstruction just off-site. But they used whole logs. About every 9 feet, they placed a stout post in the ground. And then between them, they took big logs, split them in halves, quarters, 16ths to stretch the material. The only thing that we've done to interpret this, that we have no knowledge of, no empirical evidence, is that rail that we've inserted across the top. And the reason we put that there, they built the fort in the spring when they arrived, 1607. Green wood. They're splitting it, and some of the stains in the ground demonstrated there were really thin pieces that they put in the ground. And that green wood, I don't care if you put it 3 feet down, if it's 12 feet tall, 9 feet above ground, it's going to start with drying out. It's going to start to move. And we think surely the reason they put a stout post more or less every 9 feet is to anchor a rail, and then using what we think is the best case, bodkins, wooden bodkins. People ask us, what if they use rope? Rope's expensive. They're going to use what they got and the engineering that they understand. And using wooden nails, pinning joists together, pinning structures together. You'll see it over in our reconstruction of the blacksmith shop. It's what they had at hand. It's what they knew best. And that's what you use. That's what you use. So, back to the English leaving. They depart the 19th of December. 105 men and boys to be left. They depart at midnight. Down the Thames, they stop once in the Thames to pick up people. They get out into the English Channel. They're met with a headwind. They stop twice around Dover for people and supplies. And then around about January 1st, they raise those big sails. I suppose, this is probably more editorializing than I should, that maybe by divine providence, there's this wind that's going to pick up from the east to push them against what is always in the channel, a prevailing wind from the North Atlantic. They stay in sight of England for 6 weeks. And they've got how many weeks of food and water for the whole voyage? Well, just test it, make sure you're awake. So they have to stop in the Canaries, and the Portuguese don't want to trade with them because they spend 3 weeks there. They stop twice in the Caribbean because they've run out of food and water. On the island of Nevis, one of the 105 men, a gentleman, insists on going ashore because now we're in the realm of New Spain, and he starts to frantically dig. Where do you think he's looking? Gold. And he dies from heat exhaustion. He's buried in the hole. So now it's 104 that are going to be left here. And finally, the 26th of April at dawn, the mariners sight land. Nobody on the ship coming over knew who would be in charge when they arrived here, because apparently some of the officers of the Virginia Company feared that some of the gentlemen coming over had so much of their personal wealth invested to come here to pick it up that they were afraid. Now these are the company officers talking about their peers that are coming over here on the first wave. They're worried that if, for whatever reason, the admiral of the fleet, his name is Christopher Newport, he determines that they have to abort mission and go back. They were afraid that some of the gentlemen might lead a mutiny. So, making sure nobody had an advantage, no one is going to know until they arrive who's in charge. That night, 26th of April, they open the box with the instructions of exactly the particulars of where to go, how to settle yourselves, what to look for, what to avoid, parameters. But on top are the list of names. 7 names. 6 of them are gentlemen and present in the admiral's cabin. But that 7th name, he's on that ship that night, the flagship, the Susan Constant. It's just that he's below deck in chains for having mouthed off to one of the gentlemen on the voyage over. He's turned his back on us. He doesn't like this part of the story. His name is Captain John Smith. And even before the English arrive here, his social betters despise him. That night they cut the chains free, but it'll still take him 6 weeks to allow him to sit in with the council meetings, the governing body that will see to the interests of the company. And I got to tell you, it very quickly devolves in the interest of sets of the gentlemen here, groups, infighting and division. Well, so why did they hate Smith so much? One at a time. You've given me till 1:15, and I will honor that. Smith, young man, comes from Lincoln, backwater. Remember the Beverly Hillbillies? That's kind of what Lincoln is. Yeah, farmers and fishers. His father, a yeoman farmer, apprentices him to a merchant, and then his father dies. Smith runs off, crosses the channel when he's 15, maybe 16 years, it's not clear, to join with the Huguenots, in a religious war in France, being led by the papists there. Smith becomes troubled morally, religiously, that it is immoral ungodly for Christians to spill blood amongst themselves. So he comes back to England. He's near 16 now, and he finds an aged knight that taught him to ride a horse, manage a lance upon it, and swordsmanship. 2 years he's tutored in the art of war. Very Machiavellian. And then, 18 years, he crosses the channel, winds up in Romania, fighting the Turks. He's awarded his captaincy by a Romanian prince. Where's the Romanian prince from? What province in Romania? Well, when I think about it, I can't make this up. Yeah, Transylvania. Yeah. There's some other reason to think about Halloween in a little different way. But he will lead a company for a couple of years. The little army is overwhelmed by the Turks. Smith, life spared, he's a captain, but he's taken to Istanbul, survives 2 years of being enslaved to a genteel family, but he will kill his overseer, take his clothes as his guise to escape, and he finally gets back to England. He's 25 years old. Now today, what would we call this guy? MacGyver. I'm serious. He's a survivor. That's why his name was the third on the list. And yet he arrives in chains. What else do they have to do? Where to go? Settle no less than 100 miles from the ocean. Make it really difficult for the Spanish to find it, because they surely are going to be looking for it. I should tell you now, just kind of off the cuff, we're at mile marker 38. Kind of short. So what was the selling point? People ask us, there's a swamp here. Oh yeah. Think about what I do for a living. I know how humid and buggy it gets in the summer. This little spot of land here on this 1,500 acre island is the highest point on the whole island. Their instruction, find a place uninhabited by the indigenous people. Whatever you do, treat the indigenous people with respect, because as they come to show you love, they will take you to where they're golden. Yeah, you could do this tour now. Right? Also, in times of drought, if they show you love, they'll share their food with you. So they didn't find anybody living. But there are a few other things. Find a place easily defended. Find a place on high ground. Find a place with fresh water. That's brackish water. What's going on? They set out on the 27th, exploring the lower basin of the Chesapeake Bay. Go up a river adjacent to what is today Norfolk, Virginia. Several branches of the Elizabeth River, come back out, and notice this really wide river where it empties into the basin of the Chesapeake, the James they call it, in honor of the king, and make it no more than 36 miles, and they round the southernmost, easternmost point of the island. If it wasn't so dang hot, I'd stand out in that field. We don't need to do that. And you can see that point, and they notice the trees increase in height. The further along the island they look, highest point here, they take note that there's a gut, a turn in of the island right there, which makes this spit of land that extends out even more pronounced, with a sloping bank for the entire southern aspect that terminates with the channel right against the shore. And folks, they also write at low tide, the river water is sweet. Now, they wouldn't have made that mistake. Something else happened. We know that beginning in the mid-14th century to the mid to late 17th century, the northern hemisphere of the world is engulfed in something that climatologists call the Little Ice Age. And it is incredibly severe the last 30 years, 1570s of the 16th century to the mid 1640s, the mid 1640s, 17th century. And if you look at the Dutch paintings of this period, everybody's always ice skating. What's the deal? They write, chroniclers in Holland, the Netherlands today, they write that the hard frosts start in September and last till May. Many people thought it was just isolated to Northern Europe, North America. Our best guess why they made such a devastating error. It was fresh water at low tide. But what was the phenomenon? We think the only answer, there had been just a heck of a snow, a bad winter up in the Blue Ridge Mountains that feed the principal rivers that feed the Chesapeake Bay. It was a late spring coming, and finally it starts to warm up. Maybe it's the beginning of May. All that ice and snow at low tides coming in, and it cuts the brackish water just enough that they've got it aced. They come ashore the 14th, clear trees, erect tents, do not bring ashore any of their arms or armament, their breastplates, helmets, swords, leather straps across them, across their chests, called bandoliers. Hanging down from them are things that some people think are duck calls. They're called chargers, made of tinned iron, covered with leather. You'll see some originals that we've excavated when you get to the Archaearium, our archaeology museum. They contain gunpowder, muskets, military muskets, this high. My thumb fits down into the 80 caliber bore. 20 pounds heft. You use a musket rest to steady them. All left in the hold of the ship because they don't want the Indians to see them as adversarial, as here to make war. Some of the gentlemen bring ashore fowlers, short guns, cavaliers and arquebuses of a much less caliber, 36 to 45 caliber, that they intend, and do they write, use with birdshot to shoot small game. And it's a good thing they brought them ashore, because the Indians from the region, largely engineered by the chief that lived 8.5 miles up the river. They write about him. Wo Winchilpunk just comes springing from your lips, right? Wo Winchilpunk. He was the king of the Pasiphae tribe, and he claims the island, and nobody negotiated for them investing here. And he makes some phone calls. 200 Indians appear. We think over where that tree line is, kind of adjacent to where you all drove in. And within an hour, they write it increases near double that. And then they attack. The Indians, they write later, they will observe it time and time again, they run at you in an arc. 7, 8, or 9 of them, each capable of striking what they aim at 30 yards, each one capable of launching 8 arrows a minute. And they're running at you. And the rank and file here, the laborers, have nothing to defend themselves with. They hide in tents, they write. The gentlemen, to their credit, will fire toward them with what we think is birdshot, because they don't want to hurt them, but they know that the Indians are afraid of the muskets. And it disperses that group, but they write no sooner from a different quarter. Another group came at us. It raged hot for an hour. Had it not been for the ships lying against the shoreline, firing over top of us. Bar shot, an iron bar with 2 iron balls welded to either end. At sea, in naval engagements, bar shot is fired because once fired, it spins and it breaks away yard arms and rigging and shrouds. But in this case, it broke away branches, they write, over where the Indians mustered from. It drove them off. And then they took an accounting. 18 wounded. And one boy, Richard Mutton, an arrow in his leg. Couldn't stop the blood. He died. Against the west wall of the fort, you can see a pop-up sign over there. I'll point it out when we walk over there. The orientation of that person laid out it's north-south. Every other, never say always, never say never, almost every other burial. And there are over 400 burials. First church, 1608. Second church, third church, fourth churches. Fourth church was used until the mid-18th century. 50 years, 40 years, a full 40 years after they moved the capital, the parish still stayed active. Lots of burials. But that burial in particular is curious. All the rest of the burials, the folks are laid out traditional Protestant Christian methodology. Heads to the west, so on the day of judgment they rise to meet their Maker at dawn. Hastily dug too short the grave shaft. Kid, 15 years maybe, stuffed into it. You can learn about Richard Mutton when you get to the museum. But this sets the tone. They meet that night, the gentlemen, not just the council. We got to build a fort. Sailors come ashore, help them. They get the fort built. Less than 3 weeks, they write. The sailors happily bring ashore the barley that's been shipped over for their diet, not telling them that it shipped in the hold of the ship that leaked the worst. And for 26 weeks, it sucked up the bilge water, and then they brought it ashore and placed it in the middle of the fort in a tent with the sun beating down on it. What could possibly go wrong there? They built the fort. They got everything stowed away. The Quiacohanics come across the river, they write. That point over there, they come across, explain to them, you know, we've got space over here for you. Think about opportunity cost. You don't want to really be over there. Well, Winchell Punk's already sent, you know, the hit squad. Why don't you come over here? We'll look after you. And they say, oh, no, we've already unladen the ship. We're good here. Paramount, their instruction, whatever you do, don't upset the indigenous people. And they even had an out after they were attacked. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just offering to you what they wrote and trying to figure out how it could have all gone south so quickly. 22nd of June, Newport leaves. By that point, they write there's 95 people alive because they've discovered that the Indians continue to lie in ambuscado in the tall grasses surrounding the fort. And anybody that even goes out to answer the call of nature, don't ask me what that means, you know. They find the body strewn with arrows. So they have to start sending out armed men to the Lurchines. It's a hostile environment. But they write, there's a cool breeze every morning from the northwest. And then the summer comes. And with it, a very desolate Jamestown Island. You should have been here yesterday. You've gotten a good taste of it. The wind dies. All the weather, extreme storms from the southwest come right at this point. A young man named George Percy writes, we were destroyed with cruel diseases, swellings, fluxes, burning fevers, and by wars with the natural. But there were never Englishmen left in a foreign country, and such misery is where we, in this newly discovered Virginia. We watch it every 3 nights, a lying on the bare, cold ground, what weather soever come, and then warded all the next day, which made our men most feeble. Our food, a small can of barley, sod and water, to 5 men a day. Our drink, cold water taken from the river, that it flowed, were very salt, but at low tide, it were full of slime and filth, and it brought the destruction to many of our men. And thus we lived in this misery some 5 months, not having 5 able men to man the bulwarks upon any occasion. Our men, night and day, are groaning in every corner of this fort. Most pitiful to hear. Folks, this is that place. This is that place. By the 10th of September, they buried 47. By the middle of October, 51. They are well now below 50 of the intended 105. And as the autumn comes on, it gets cooler. John Smith has made the truck master. Truck to truck. Derivative of the Dutch word track for trade. Trading master. And he goes down and up river. And he's successful. He brings back each time 60 bushels of corn. The Quiacohanics come across, still vying to get them over there and bring food. It's not so bad in the autumn. Smith is worried in early December he doesn't have enough. He'll go up 8.5 miles to the Chickahominy River and up that river until he runs out of river into a great frozen ooze. The winter has started in October, and he's captured by the war chief of the Pamunkey Indians, Opechancanought, and taken on a 2-week odyssey, finally to be introduced to the Manitowoc Powhatan. 20 years before, Raleigh's men came up and heard about a great chief that had 6 tribes under his thumb. He now has 32. Within a 100-mile radius, no less than 12,500 native people, men, women, and children. They could wipe this place off at any time. Why don't they? Smith is captured, introduced to the emperor the last week of December, and the emperor says, "I like you, kid," more or less. The emperor, think of opportunity cost. "I want you to help me on this river with my arch enemies above the falls, the Monacans, a Siouan language-based people that come east and attack my tribes and take slaves." Smith's kind of in the news. Sure. They brought Smith back here the 2nd of January with a deer and some turkey. They write his arrival made 38 alive. That very night, Newport finally arrives with 40 people. 30 of them will die within 3 months. They arrive sickly. And Newport brings more putrefied barley. That's really important. Yeah. It's not until a fellow named Nelson, not Horatio, but Francis Nelson, the captain of the Phoenix, arrives with, we think, 60 or 80 new colonists that are healthy. And they begin to build, because they've been living prior to that in those tents that finally rotted, and they're stretching them, we have evidence, stretching them from the palisade on the inside to make lean-tos. They want to build the church. It's a big structure. 70 by 24 feet. A chronicler that arrives in 1610 writes, that's a lot of clay. People ask us, conversely, why did they put the kitchen in a cellar? Why was the blacksmith shop in a cellar? Why were 7 other buildings in this earliest footprint of the fort in cellars? Why did they have cellars? We think the question to ask, what are they going to do with all that clay? If you dig down from where you stand to me, ma'am, 10 feet, more or less, and 10 feet that way and that way and that way, and we want to build a wall above ground, it's going to take 2 feet in, 8 feet down for that wall. Same on this side, same on that. What are you going to do with all the clay in the middle? We think they're using it for the barracks. They have 4 barracks they built. The church and several other structures that we found stains for. Post went in the ground, but no evidence of cellar. Why would they dig a hole and waste the energy to harvest clay when they can use the cellar? Ambient temperature in the summer, cooler above grade or below. Winter, cooler above grade. I beg your pardon. In the winter, warmer above. They knew exactly what they were doing. Yeah. Summer of 1608, John Smith will leave with folks working on the church and building other structures. Twice down the James River, up the Chesapeake Bay, 7 weeks each time he's gone. He comes back right over here. I'm heading here to sit down and wrap up. He orders the digging of the first well. We excavated it. Over 600,000 objects. It's a great place, the middle of the fort, if you got your rubbish to throw away. And he expanded the fort to the east. Let's walk over to the shed. Sit you down. Summer, they're given an instruction. Do not allow the natives to know your numbers have diminished. So you don't have a boot hill outside of the fort, a big burial ground and a procession. You have to keep it on the PQ. The earliest datable, documentable English burial ground. British North America is right here. These graves date to 1607. And the young man, Richard Martin, where that sign is, right there. You all are still looking pretty good. You know, you're not wilting. I could maybe get some of you to come out and wear armor with me. Thank you, sir. I spent some time. Back home. Yeah. And I've worked with several Elizabethan linguists to help me. I get told it's for a while, and I do. Truth, I do. I frighten strangers. I do. Is this comfy? Am I doing all right for you guys? So, what's going to happen? Because I'm out of time, and I know that, and I thank you for indulging me. What will happen will be Smith will be in charge that remainder of 16/8. Detractors will go back, they'll make complaint. The company knows Smith is right, he's just the wrong mouthpiece. The company is sending people here to find something that the company can in turn a profit on. And if there's not gold, silver, iron ore, naval stores, pine trees, lots of yellow pine trees, from those they can harvest and fabricate, manufacture pitch and pine tar. They write that the pine trees for 80 feet up are straight. They think about masts for ships, and there's cypress that is naturally water repellent. Yeah, there's a wealth here, but we've got to change how we view things. So they're going to send a fleet of 9 ships and a new government that's going to declare martial law, because everybody here should be working for the company, and there's a lot of special interest. Something I'm sure in the 21st century none of us can relate to. So how do you break that cycle? Declare martial law. The fleet of 9 ships is put together. It sails early June 1609. 500 people, supplies on those 9 ships for a year. They are just out of sight of England, and the smallest ship starts to take water and turns around. So now it's 8 ships by 450 people. They have an incredible voyage, they write. Good wind. They got plenty of food. Until they are within 7 or 8 days of the Chesapeake, when a mid-July hurricane hits the fleet and rages for 4 days, filling the hold with water, such that the ship's pumps and the bales that they use will not render it, and they're forced to throw their supplies overboard. As the storm abates, 2 ships find each other and make it here the beginning of August. A few days later, 3 more ships find each other. I think it's 4 more days after that, 2 other ships found each other. But there's a real problem. There's still one ship that's not accounted for. And it's the flagship that has the replacement for John Smith on it. No one knows. It, at the height of the storm, the pilot managed to lock the bow of the ship on a reef off of Bermuda. And those castaways will spend 10 months taking Bermudian cedar and building 2 ships, and they will arrive here May of 1610. Meanwhile, back at the fort, John Smith had 60 people alive, and suddenly 7 ships arrive with 280 more people and no food. And they have now pushed and pushed and pushed the native population begging for food. John Smith, coming back down from upriver near the falls, near present-day Richmond, trying to negotiate to leave. About 100 people there with formerly friendly Indians. That all goes south, and he's got to evac them. But coming back down, his gunpowder bag explodes on the boat coming down. We think it was a hip job, but he arrives pretty bad off, pretty hurtful wound. Smith is born in 1580 and will not die until 1631. But in September of 1609, he's got a bad wound, and they put him on a ship, his detractors, and he's out of here. As soon as the local Indians know he's gone, they surround the fort. Remember, you've got 100 yards on the riverside before you get to where the ships are. We call it the starving time. The winter of 1609-10. Now you know how it happened. When those 2 ships built on Bermuda finally get here to declare martial law, they think they've had the ordeal. They had to build their own ships while they ate mid-Atlantic fish, loggerhead turtle, and wild boar on Bermuda that had no natural predator. They arrive here and discover out of 340, maybe 350 people, 60 alive, looking as skeletons, anatomies, Elizabethan word for skeleton. And they relate that we are starved. They also relate that they were forced to resort to survivor cannibalism, digging up the dead. As soon as the regional Indians see the 2 ships from Bermuda, they start attacks. The Bermudians brought enough food to get them here. They think this is the stable place, and they can't hold it. All they can do is get out of here. Taking the 2 Bermuda ships and 1 ship that was built here, and another ship that had been left wintered, 1609-10. They load everybody up. Their plan is to get out into the ocean and let that current carry them very swiftly up to Newfoundland, where the English and Irish fishing fleets will be. They're late catching an outbound tide, the 7th of June. They get into an S-curve and it stalls the tide outbound. And so they drop anchor because they don't want the inbound tide to bring them back any closer. Next morning, they're raising anchor and they look to the east. There's a rowboat coming up the river. Previous fall, John Smith back in England, he told the company it's going to go south. And they lit a fire under a fellow named Thomas West, Lord Delaware. His instruction to declare martial law. Nobody knowing that the previous deputy governor had actually survived, had not been lost at sea. He arrived the very day, within the bay, the very day that they were bugging out of here. Those folks in the rowboat have the instruction to tell everyone to prepare for the arrival of the Governor General. Imagine you were almost out of here and you get sent back, because that's what happened. The 10th of June, Lord Delaware and his fleet of 3 ships and 150 soldiers and supplies for a year arrives. He comes ashore. He listens to a sermon in the church, a sermon of thanksgiving, and then basically stands up, we have an account of it, and he damns the folks that survived the winter starving time, asking them what they had done to bring God's wrath down upon such a noble endeavor. He declares martial law. He orders that the town be cleansed, and all the rubbish, the dilapidated buildings, all that rubbish picked up and thrown into the cellars of the worst buildings and covered over. People ask us all the time, how have you found such a concentration of artifact, material culture from the earliest period? It's because we know two people wrote about it. That Lord Delaware, the first thing he did is, we got to clean this place up. And they threw all that rubbish into those cellars. We estimate at least 600 people arrived and died the first 3 years. Suppose every one of them brought but one ceramic bowl and they dropped it and it busted. Think of the pottery shards. But we know that there were gentlemen that brought boxes of pottery based on the amount that we found and recovered and put back together. It's incredible. Jamestown will never, ever ebb that low again. It will grow from a fort to a port town that they called Newtown, expanding to the east. It's counterintuitive, right? We always learned, 5th grade, the western expansion. Go west, young man. You go west on the island, you're off of it, right there. Island's gone. So to keep the town here, they expanded the town to the east. And that will become the boom town for the tobacco economy. Tobacco warehouses, tobacco wharves, and a slave auction block. Got to remind you, probably, maybe forgot, maybe never knew. John Rolfe, the father of the American tobacco industry, as they claim it, was on the sea venture, marooned on Bermuda. He almost didn't make it. He will arrive here in 1610, and he will bring with him seeds from Spanish tobacco. We think maybe he got them on the island of tobacco, on the island of Bermuda. Tobacco grows wild here. It's called, colloquially, rabbit tobacco. The scientific name is Nicotiana rustica. Burns the back of your throat, makes you cough, makes you throw up. Mild hallucinogenic. It's what the native people smoked. Rolfe is given credit, the first person to hybridize. The Spanish tobacco, principally grown the islands of Trinidad and Tobago. Warm climate, long growing seasons. Really for the leaves to mature to the sweetness. And it's that sweet tobacco that sweeps Europe, beginning just after Columbus. But Rolfe is given credit as cross-pollinates and getting a tobacco that's not as sweet, but anybody could grow it. 1613, 200 pounds of that tobacco are sent back to England as a trial. 5 years later, the Virginians will grow and send back 20,000 pounds. 5 years. Tobacco will become king. They stopped using the fort by 1625 after a major uprising of the native population in 1622 that is put down. By 1625, a chronicler wrote, you've got to go 8 miles into the interior to find an Indian village. Indians are living in English settlements, but to actually find Indians in their native habitat, you got to go 8 miles. They built the fort in 1607 because they were attacked. No longer a concern. The town will grow. Jamestown will remain the capital of England's largest colony for 93 years. When a second state house, it's over there where our archaearium is, as you walk around there, you'll see the foundations under it. But when that second state house on that site was destroyed by a fire in 1698, the representatives from the 13, I beg your pardon, I almost said 13 colonies, from the counties took a vote that the next year they would convene over at Middle Plantation, Middle Way, between the ferry that crossed the James here at Jamestown and where Yorktown will be created on the York River. And they rename first act of that General Assembly in 1699 is to rename Middle Plantation Williamsburg. Within 50 years, everybody that lived out here moves on, except for two families that buy up all the rest of the property. It's cleared. And what do you think they do with it? They farm it. Yes, they do. By 1850, one of those two families now owns the whole island. What do you think they're doing? Farming it. 1850. If you're from Virginia, you're golden. You go out beyond Kansas and Nebraska, and you say, I'm from Virginia. Whoa. Virginia's the mother of presidents. Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Harrison, for a month. And then his vice president, John Tyler. That's before 1850. They will tell you across the country about John Smith, about John Rolfe marrying Lady Rebecca, her baptized name, Pocahontas, in the first church at Jamestown. First representative assembly of English-speaking people met at the second church at Jamestown in 1619 and created the first law amongst English speakers. They know all of that. Virginia's golden. And then the American Civil War came along. Where was the capital of the Confederacy? Right up this river. I've already offered I'm a native Virginian, but I'm a historian. And I get this. Before the Civil War, Richmond was a major publishing house for histories of the Republic. And they featured Virginia right up front. After the Civil War, what's that adage? To the victors go spoils. And who writes the history? The publishing houses become Boston, New York, Philadelphia. And after the Civil War, a place called Cincinnati? And what are they going to write good about the state that harbored a rebellion, the capital of a rebellion, that almost destroyed the Republic? Not much, and they don't. And it is at that point, this is where I dig the giant woolly mammoth hole, and you all kind of lumber into it. It is at that point that a new origin story for the Republic is created and disseminated. And it is of a pious people that arrived in 1620 for what kind of freedom? Drop the microphone, walk off the stage. It's a lot better story than a story about the enslaved, resulting in a civil war. So many northern sons, fathers, uncles, brothers came down here and never came home. And it gets galvanized. It gets galvanized. The Pilgrim story, 1620. 24 years after the end of the Civil War, a group of Virginia women whose husbands lost the war, and some of them phrase it that way. They don't say we need to get market share back. But, they've lost face. And Virginia's never been shamed like this. So they start the first preservation organization. 1889, the Association for the Preservation of Virginia's Antiquities. What's the antiquity they want to save? Buildings. It had something to do with the building up of the Republic before the war. And don't you dare tell me you don't know what war I'm talking about. Yeah. 1889, they organized saving the powder magazine that you can see to this day on Duke of Gloucester Street over in Williamsburg. Then they looked to Jamestown Island. There's one above ground structure Looks like something out of a Mary Shelley novel. Ivy growing on it, forlorn. It's that church tower right there. 1893, the APVA is given stewardship of 22 and a half acres. And immediately, locals come out of the woodwork and tell them, you've got an erosion problem. They do a mid-17th and a mid-19th century map comparison of the shoreline, and they discover at least 25 acres are gone. So they start raising money, and they put in that seawall right there. It's completed in 1903. Simultaneous to this, they hire a couple of archaeologists and historians. The archaeologists start digging in the now open churchyard to the east of that church tower, and they find 3 sets of foundations. And you can be sitting right up front or way back, and it's not going to help you with this picture. It's horrible. But if you can at least make out a giant inverted U, these 3 sets of foundations follow the same rectangular shape. It's just that the innermost rectangle are cobblestones, the next bricks, and the next are bricks. And it's that third foundation, the second set of bricks, that is associated with that church tower. We know that today, but to them, that church tower for them is 1607. And it allows them to look north and proudly say, "Ha! We were first!" And your little dog, too. That alone, finding those 3 sets of foundations, understanding the cobblestone, on those cobblestones 400 years ago, in 1618, was completed a timber frame church that in 1619 housed the first representative assembly of English-speaking people in the Western Hemisphere. That alone gives them the leverage to raise money to build that memorial church. Nothing else happens on the island except for annual pilgrimages on May 14th, Landing Day, to the church tower. Until 1934, the rest of the island becomes a national park. The Park Service does extensive archaeology over in Newtown. They find hundreds of thousands of objects from the 1620s to the end of the 17th century. The Park Service archaeologists offer to come over here to the high ground. And the ladies say, well, there's no sense, the fort is out there. Park Service historian says, but they built it on the high ground. Fort's out there. But fort's gone. And beginning in the late 19th century, it is perpetuated that the site of the fort was lost to erosion. Before and after World War II, archaeologists for the Park Service find hundreds of thousands of objects. After World War II, the APVA put a sign up right over there. This is very flowery, what I'm about to say, but it was like this. Lost to the sands of time, the site of the first permanent English settlement. It's out there, lost. After World War II, the state of Virginia wanted a place that every Virginia school child could come to see what it must have been like. And since everybody knows there's a sign over here, the state of Virginia bought land right off the island, and using John Smith's quotes and a host of others, they built a reconstructed fort, 3 ships, and an Indian village. They called it Jamestown Festival Park. Opened in the autumn of 1956 in preparation for the 350th anniversary of the founding of Virginia, 1957. Between the opening of Jamestown settlement in the early 1980s, archaeologists from different universities and colleges in Virginia excavated lots of early 17th century sites along the James River. And the state of Virginia became the principal repository for all of these objects that when they were working on Jamestown settlement didn't exist. As they started looking to 2007 and the 400th anniversary, the state of Virginia said, we really need to rehab the old museums at Jamestown Festival Park. And now we've got all of these artifacts we can put in them. And they did. They redid the museum. They reopened it and rebranded the state site Jamestown Settlement. No confusion there. Yeah, Jamestown Settlement. It was opened, I want to say it was April of 1990. I came across the invitation. I attended the grand opening. But it's still 4 more years before a former state archaeologist will say, you know, I really think the fort is here. I understand inside your memorial church, you got those big pieces of glass where you can see the 3 foundations. I think those cobblestones that you've highlighted have something to do with the second church, the 1618 church. But here's the problem. Dr. William Kelso, former state archaeologist, he says they wrote that they continued to repair and use the fort until 1627. And I cannot help but feel like if they're still worried into the 1620s about a native attack, they would not have built the second church outside of the fort. Would you mind letting me dig? And he says one more thing. By the way, I got funding. Well, let's talk. And regardless of how much energy had been spent saying the fort is gone, he started, and within 5 months, right parallel to the river, the next year, 1995, the archaeologists pushed eastward and found part of the old east wall, part of John Smith's fort extension, and part of the southeastern bulwark. To date, 29 years of excavation, over 4 million artifacts. A smattering of them can be seen in our archaearium, our archaeology museum. Did I do okay? That is this place. Fully, most of our guests don't know anything about it. We've got a great cafe there. They have accelerants if you need them, libation, great sandwiches, always have great sweets, a great museum. If you've enjoyed what I've said, you could do a couple things. Go on TripAdvisor. Tell folks that historic Jamestown is worthy of a visit. If you're really juiced up, ask me for a donation card. We are separate from the National Park Service, separate from the state, and the organization I work for has been trying to preserve, protect this place, excavate it since 1893. If you don't give me any money, but if you make a donation, I'll give you the card, take it to either of our bookstores here or back at the main VC, Visitor Center. We give you a small token, a lapel pin that is actually copied off of an object. It's official size and weight. The original, you can see in the archaearium. It's a lead seal, a baling seal, that we think was probably on a bundle of cloth. Ours conveniently has a stud on the back. You can use it as a tie tack, a lapel pin. And we give it to you gratis. Of course we don't. But if you make a $35 donation to them. Sir, I couldn't help but hear you earlier. You were complaining that you really weren't happy with the Father's Day present you got this year. You know, you could change that. We've changed people's lives by just making a donation. I know that's a camp, but I couldn't help it. I can't help myself. There it is. Well, sometimes it backfires on me. Kind of going south up here now. But thank you all so much for giving me your time. It's the most valuable commodity. I hope that you better understand what went on here and what continues to go on 5 days a week here, our archaeology and all the interpretation we do between. Have a good afternoon.
Okay, we finished the tour here, the walking tour here at Jamestown. Sorry, there's a damn lawnmower in the background here. So I'll face this way so I don't get the speaker. But this is the site here, I do want to say, is where Fuma did his channeling back when we were here last time, which we stupidly opened up in an old settlement slash battlefield slash a place with a lot of death. So you never want to do that. Dumb idea. Did that in Salem around reptilian sites, all this other stuff. But you've heard me say in past recording about some things they mentioned in the tour before, and I regret fully not recording that one because it was not mentioned this time around. And they did mention the starving time, the cannibalism, and they mentioned Thomas West, which you've heard in about channelings about. They didn't mention the silver box. They didn't mention the some of the ritualistic cannibalistic stuff that happened. They mentioned a necessity for it, but then they switched it to say religion. Basically, with religion, God said basically thought, "Oh, what did you do to piss God off?" kind of thing to hit the starving time, and it was prosperous after that. Typical vernacular. But now I'm going to correct a couple of things. You may have heard, in channelings even from then and things from now saying, "Oh, John Smith would have eventually become president if time agent Thomas West hadn't done what he did." And there was no, before somebody heckles me, yes, I'm aware there was no United States, and I know he wouldn't have been president of the United States. It would have been leader of the world at that, of the colony at that time. I want to correct what I said, what was said before. Not president of the United States, as I realize that was over 100 years before the Revolution. I get that. But it would have been leader of the colonies. Okay. And I know there wasn't even 13 colonies at that point. So that was pre-Salem, all of that, but you get what I'm saying. So, this is also where I will dig out the ghost box. It was a great tour the guy gave, I will say. They did not there's certain things that weren't mentioned from the time before. Like I said, I fully regret not getting the other tour recorded, because there were some things said with that, especially around Thomas West, with the silver box, the M, the whole bit, that was very prevalent in knowing that this was Montauk based. Because I've heard stories about the agents and time travelers in Montauk all carrying a little box with them that has an M on it. This is actually common knowledge in those circles. And that's how I pegged it with that. It was a mystery, but this is what some people in those projects have recorded. What that thing does, and I've said this before, is it prevents what Star Trek says is temporal aphasia. You have a signature, a temporal energetic vibratory frequency signature wherever you're in, and you vibrate within that temporal signature. So objects too. This is how we could tell if that the Cabal's running a scam time travel wise. If they planted an artifact in the past, ends up in the here and now, and go, oh yeah, see, it's history. It has a temporal signature that would poo-poo all that if people knew how to do that. But they would have a temporal marker of where it came from. A human that does this, you should see in Star Trek where they lose consciousness if they travel in time. Like you saw Kirk whipping around the sun, or the people on Discovery losing consciousness. They all zonked out. That's a real effect. But it denotes an energy signature, like they said in Discovery with Giorgio's character. Long story short, some wouldn't be able to handle it if they didn't have an anchor to where they came from, like a lifeline. The box is that lifeline. You'd go through an aphasia and almost die, like the character did, and they just said another Federation agent did in the storyline. That's a true concept. That's what the boxes are for. It's a grounding rod. But the guy died here. They said he came from England, I believe, but where would you go if you were manicuring time or gardening it? You'd go to where all the major points were to assess, be a ground agent, because of the fact that, yeah, you know history,
but you need people on the ground recording it, knowing how to manicure it. Because like in another show where they came back in time 100,000 years, they went by people's social media accounts. People lie on there. They wouldn't. Then you need boots on the ground like the other characters. Those show was called Travelers. You need that. Of course, you need that if you're wanting to manicure things and manicure the timeline, like the Kang character in Loki. So you need that. So if you're running an operation like that, so
I really appreciate the fact that he
Yeah.
brought up himself. I'm sure you, before talking about this now, you would have seen the recording of the tour.
Yes.
How at the end he talked about the Civil War time frame, what happened there, and then the beginning of what he would also say was the victors rewriting history.
Yes.
I love
Very
that.
important.
I actually love that because of what happened with bringing Vessa through, where she jumped, even though we were in Yorktown and we were talking about the Revolutionary War. She jumped to the Civil War, and wanted to bring in some things about how heavily the families were fighting for control now of this more established area of who was going to come on top of controlling it, which I thought was really interesting, because then again, here's somebody completely innocent starts talking about what happened with the Civil War and how Jamestown's history was somewhat erased as the first colony for something that sounded much better.
Yes.
So I think it's
From
a
regular
brilliant
yeah.
affirmation of what Vesselwood and Channeling was saying about that time frame and how the true manipulations of different things really began in earnest.
Yes, and from regular history, you even see it with the combating factions and people vying for economic, superiority, and then you have the temporal factions doing the same, like you see in the Trek lore with the temporal Cold War. It's a very similar dynamic in those two things. I pass between a lot of these different mediums because you see the disclosure locked into multiple mediums telling the same story. So this is why I cross into science fiction. This is why I cross into regular history, because they're one thing, just being retold. So I can appreciate how a person independent of us brought up a similar point or the same point. So that's where you see it's a synchronicity or a validation right there. From science fiction to reality to something people wouldn't even believe is true. So I'm going to cap this particular video, but I am going to start the Ghost Box session here in a second. I'll have to end this video because I have to do the flip thing with this. But just know that was an excellent tour, and I will end this here. Time stamping this at 12:54 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Sunday, September 3rd, 2023. Thank you. Okay, still here at this site here, and this is where we did the channeling with Fuma all those years ago. That's 6 years ago, almost 7. So, per his own admission, and this still holds, he was a child at that time here, through here. So, I will do the Ghost Box session. This is, of course, when the people start gathering here. All right. So, question-wise, before I start this, and of course there's children everywhere, yeah, it happens without fail. Everybody. Happens without fail when you're trying to do something important. All right. I know it's a public place, but still, it does happen. So, the questions involved here. I know the original history. Of course, it's true they're able to prove certain things, but how much of it was temporally manicured and planted, of course, by the Gardner family, and also what is more Thomas West's involvement? I know I asked that on the last Ghost Box session. I mentioned his name too, and John Smith's involvement, and if the benevolent version of himself wishes to speak on here. And also any comments from our allies.
S-Box. Scanning FM.
Strike. Today. 18 Shit.
Did the channeling leave a dent here last time? Any final thoughts from our allies and friends? Yes. All right, thank you for that. All right, I am closing this ghost box circle as of this moment in time, or this closing the circle for this session as of this moment in time. It is now 12:58 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Sunday, September 3rd, 2023. Thank you. Okay, we're doing one more ghost box session before we leave Jamestown. I want to make a comment though. You see that through the trees, that obelisk? Remember what I said about soul traps? We spotted these years ago in from this one place. And where they can do that repeating looshing of a battle, or keep residuals locked in place for a much longer unnatural time frame. You know all of this part. That's more the ground soul trap type thing. And that's also method of communication, also mind control. You have the Washington Monument, DC. So, one of the questions, what did they do, not only binary network wise, but otherwise, with the compressed granite and all that in this monument, and the energy emanating thereof when to therein? And why was John Smith always in trouble? What in the establishment was he trying to, what glass ceiling was he trying to break? Or did he just do just to do? So, I'll leave that, and then I'll show us any comments from our allies. And what part of that did John Smith know about in those times? The other stuff I mentioned, the other unnamed things in the normal history. The stuff you don't hear normally. So, I'll leave that open.
Xbox. Scanning. FM. Is there
And what about from the Indians' perspective? What did they see and perceive? Several pissed voices. Sorry about that. Also, since Fuma, you were here, if you hear this, what do you have perspective on here? Any final thoughts? Thank you. And I do have to insist that since this being a historical site, possibly haunted site as well in some areas, that no beings follow us home that do not have our highest good, highest intentions in thought and in energy. No ghosts follow us home. Nothing follows us home, causes problems in our home, and our sanctuary, in our temple space. So I'm leaving that here. I now hereby close this circle for this ghost box session. As of this moment in time, it is now 1:12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Sunday, September 3rd, 2023. Thank you. Okay, as for an energy report being here, I do have to say that, yeah, there are very dense areas, but there are lighter ones. You know, we did a blessing of that obelisk the first time we were out here. We did do the Law of One when we were out here. Didn't have any devices then. I have left Tower Buster and Assault Puck somewhere in the giant vicinity here. You're not going to know where it is. But just know that we've done it again, and it's much less dense than it was before, and at least even from my perspective now. But I'm not stupid enough to do another channeling here. That caused a world of hurt from here, Gettysburg, Boston, and Salem. So I wouldn't recommend it. But this, I do have to say, energy's a little better, but towards the church and towards where he was giving the tour along around the back there and back by that cemetery, it was pretty dense. So just past the John Smith Monument there. So this is where I will leave it. Just know that this is an energy report / show that we're presenting you here today. Do you have any other words?
No. Hope you guys enjoyed it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. It is 1:13 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Sunday, September 3rd, 2023. Thank you. Okay, on the way out of this, you know, we were just talking a little bit, and we'll hit on this in the show a little bit, whereas, you know, they said that you could hear in the tour that they were talking about how they were arguing over where the settlement originally was and all of that. You know, how like, say, the Smithsonian would get over histories about giants and all this other stuff. You know, like, they don't want to change history. They don't want to show the real history, just like what we said with Tartaria, all that other stuff. But the simple matter is, just like what we've done with some of our older information, have rehashed and updated, excuse me, and discarded some things that we found out weren't true, is because we know how to redact something. So it's that simple. If we were wrong about something, we say so. And if we want to expand on it, on a good idea, we do so. So this is what we are trying to do with this. I wanted to notate this because that is actually a very interesting point. There are others out there that don't do this, that have either quit altogether because they don't want to be caught in something they found out later wasn't true, and they've gone a little cuckoo, or they don't want, you know, they don't want to get embarrassed. We don't go that way. So we want to make sure that we have the most accurate information out there. And I know some of this stuff changes the more, seems to change the more you learn, but it's really the same basic information and expands on it. If it doesn't do it that way, then it was originally a lie. So where it's conflicting with other things that people think are baseline, other philosophies, other insider information they think is baseline when it's not baseline, or not the proper litmus test to vet everything else. So we want to make sure that process is changed and altered dramatically, at least by millimeters and centimeters. So I'm going to leave that here. It is 1:31 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Sunday, September 3rd, 2023. Thank you. We are here at historic Jamestown, and there are several Anakim or Sasquatch people around after we cleared the area of controller sphere activity. And at first I thought it was going to be Telnorskas that wanted to talk about what was going on here, but this is one that we know well. He calls himself Fuma, and he wants to say what he saw when he was in this area even though he is technically a young Sasquatch, he was still here at this site at the time. And he sang as a child. So, let him talk. Yes, it is I, the one you know of as Fuma. I and my brethren are here protecting this one and this other one in this site, now held in sovereignty by my kind, taken from us in the time before the stage and the backstage, as you know it, though I was small, only a couple 100 years ago. My family lineage or tree, as you say, saw this site very differently than what is currently displayed here. This statue of this man over here, this colony and church, and other items of reverence are not as such. What I'm about to say may anger some, may shock some, and may have some going, yes, that sounds right. I, as a child, was here with my family. We saw the ages of battle-worn temporal incursions, fighting the war of attrition against other factions who wanted resources in this spot and time of that making. In that time, yes, there was a colony. It went by many names, not just Jamestown. The names changed as the timelines changed. You would call the positive version of this the Mandela effect, though this was the opposite of that. This is what this one calls the Montauk effect. This name changing happened because of a temporal war of attrition, as I have said. But there were far more factions than just two. There were many, few, depending on what timeline was being presented. This is why facts in historical sites are not always known. This is why facts in your history are not always known, because of this particular war of attrition. The show this one watches, known as Doctor Who, calls it a time war. This is an apt and accurate term, though it was just centered in space in the program. It is for real here on the surface of the Earth. These time incursions are still being felt in this area to this day, though this is serene, as it once was before the time incursions. It was always under contestation. These resources were not just of the physical, mineral types that one would think of natural resources. No, these were energy resources grown by people and by plants and by animals. The controllers took this as a sign that they could use this area for their own purposes. This is why they dominated this area. This is why their obelisk marks the landscape. However, many others have the ability to withdraw energy. Humans have this same ability because they contain the DNA codes of various species with that know-how. One species of which this one knows as vampires. Another species of which this one has been told the name of face eater. This I will not go in depth because it is more of a forbidden topic to my kind, because the controllers aforementioned harnessed these poor creatures in their less than awakened state. This is why they act as they do. This is why they are stuck within the barbarism of thought. But this is not all that took place here. Humans encountered these entities known as the face eater barbarians, now occupying local swamps and the like. These particular entities are our dark mirror, our anti-selves, as this one would say, our version of the Montauk effect. This is why these creatures are as they are. They are the anti-Squatch, as some have put them. They, unfortunately, influenced people in this area, very much like the Draco did in other parts of the world. This site was their befalling of energy and influence. This site was their battleground. This site is where we met with them on the field of combat, as humans would say, or battle. We entered into this line drawing in the sand, as humans say, with them. We saw they were of a temporal indifference, so we could not clash with them directly, though we could use our influences to keep them at bay and stay their influences for centuries. In your modern day, where timelines virtually have no meaning, they rise again to give thought to that of others who wish to contact my kind. They are unaware that this particular breed is of a never-were, as this one would call them, a never-were of universal timeline clashing, a war that was never meant to be, as you humans would say. My kind, though peaceful, we guard this line between one moment and the next when it comes to these entities. This is why they feel strangely to this one, because their energy is of a resonance signature, as he would say, that does not match any of the landscape or topography in the area. This is an unfortunate factual thing, not in the constant fact that this one would know as, but these beings can be altered by the ebb and flow of what created them. This anti-signature, as we say, can and will be changed, though there are others that cannot be, thanks to the controllers. This is what I wished to state this day, other than the fact that the humans here at first were unaware of what was going on. As the names changed, so did the memories of the people, as does this effect happen usually within your current society. However, this began to change as people noticed little nuances, as they did and do in your century. These nuances began to upset the balance, and this is when the face eaters appeared on your stage. This is when they occupied the area, and this is how the controllers originally took root. You see, these beings are but their servants, they're their slaves. This is also how they stave off the timeline indifferences. This does not mean they are factual in the constant sense, but this does mean they are factual in the historical sense, in the sense that they are a danger to people. This is something we are quelling, but we must warn that the temporal indifferences that fuel their barbarism still remain as grounded as the earth beneath your feet. So, in these areas, we must insist that communication with us is solely paramount, meaning the ones you know of as Sasquatch, and not the ones that hold back the fierceness of temporal darkness. Thank you. He is now leaving, or backing away and waving. I'm being instructed to stop now, so thank you, all of you. Okay, we were on the tour a little bit ago in historic Jamestown. An interesting point popped up about a man by the name of Thomas West, who was a man of prominence, buried like he was a man of providence, and they really want to talk on this subject, but I will point out this man was buried as if he was important, buried forward like he was a saint and a savior to this colony. Yeah, there's real strong opinions on this. So, it is not the Sasquatch that wish to talk this time. Just like in Roanoke, it is the dragon people. So, I will hand this over to Lintazar. And she wishes to... Okay, I'm just going to hand this over to her. Yes, dear one, it is I, Lentisar, as you would call my kind dragons, not to be confused with the other kind of reptilian, but this is not what I am getting at this time. This is a place, or was a place, of great contestation in the wars of time. What I am getting at is this unique grave that was found off that way towards a church. One that they can find only strangeness with. A silver box with an M. No, this is not the M. No, quite the, as you humans would say, bastardization of the being himself, because the Montauk Project, run by the Cabal, wishes to see themselves as not only the ever-changing winds, but the constant in the universe, very much like an ancient lord that lived so long ago, of whom we will not mention his name at all. This is the effect these people had. In the time wars of attrition, out came a faction everyone knows as the Cabal, also known as the Rothschilds and the like. They sent handlers, as this one knows them as, through time. Also, people would call them time agents, but the true time agents are of a distant century. This is a topic that we will cover much later. But these other time agents would go back and disrupt history. This disrupted bit of history was your precious Jamestown, though, as your Fuma said, the name has changed constantly because of the temporal interruptions and incursions. You may hear an edge in my voice. This is something that angers my people greatly, because of the fact that this man, though he was of an obnoxious sort, as was claimed, John Smith, this man, in the original time continuum, would have become one of your presidents of the United States, not controlled by the Cabal incursions. This was something they had to weed out, because he would have created a line that would have contested their rise to power in later centuries within your country's structure. Though they were already in power technically in that century, they were of a lesser sort, and they wished to gain a greater foothold in that century. They sent back agents like this Thomas West. In this box that he carried, though humble tools of sorts were found, and humble pieces of, say, bone and glass were found with your MRI technology. This is not quite what he had. Every time agent carries with them an anchor to the time continuum they came from, an anchor that negates them from changing with the ebb and flow of time. Even if they destroy one of their very own ancestors, they themselves are alive and kicking. This is a grounding rod that a group known as the Axiom Paradox cannot, as you say, affect. Their job is simple: to repair history. Helios has joined in with this, along with many others. But this device is what all of these agents would carry. They felt brazen enough to label each of these with an M. Know that anywhere in history that you find such a silver encasement with an M thusly placed on the cover, this is the mark of a time agent from the Cabal in the Montauk Project. No matter if you see it in church or if you see it in a historical site, this particular agent toppled or helped to topple the one you know as John Smith, though it was another that took over for him later. He then lived on in not so peaceful conditions, always squabbling over the little things that the Cabal is so known for causing in society. They tried this within your histories and succeeded on many levels. However, even they do not know the ramifications of what they have done. Though history is repairing itself, which each of these obelisks that are disabled, this axiom paradox group can come in and repair the damage. There is always remnants of said incursions. These incursions will be fragments across your space-time continuum. Though time is a fictional construct, this still is very real to humans around, therefore has manifested its own life form. This is the true nature of the axiom paradox, because time in itself is a paradox. Axiom, grounded, paradox would be chaos. Time is a construct known as grounded chaos. This is the legacy that the Cabal wished they would leave. However, the universe's true construct, or constant, took over. This is what you would know as physics. Physics did not allow for a fictional construct such as grounded chaos. So, the group was formed simply to get rid of such a fictional construct and repair itself. Thusly, these time agents then went by the wayside that your Cabal incurred. Not so long ago, they attempted to restart their program known as the Montauk Project, their precious anchor of power. No, this is something that was not allowed. This is something that will never be allowed again, because their will and their tenacity was underestimated. Though we are not saying focus on them solely and manifest poorly. Not at all. We are saying have street smarts and observe the world around you for what it truly is. Though evidence, scientific evidence, may point to a single history, just know you have several histories walking and running and flowing beneath your very feet, beneath every blade of grass that you walk on, within every tree, every brick latent upon the earth in the form of other buildings such as churches, houses, and the like. Every gravestone, every name on those gravestones is in itself an alteration to what is known. As dear Anubis said, deny the known and manifest differently. Thank you. Oh. God. Oh, crap.
Okay, hope you enjoyed all of that. I know that was a lot. But this, along with the Ghost Box sessions, there's two of them there. You know, and at the time of this recording, we're at the same day that we were in Jamestown on 9/3/23. So I personally have not gone through them yet. So I will be as surprised as you. But even though we put that in the middle of the show. Some people find that really strange that I edited it like that. But for show's sake, you got to have two ends, an opening and a middle and an end. So with this though, this goes under the galactic portion of the show, how we traditionally do on the lifting. We're going back to our roots with these shows, folks. So we're going back to doing the energy reports. We're going back to the very beginning of a lot of the information and starting from there. Even stuff I did way back on diamonds, we're covering for both GIC and lifting as well. So if
And
people are
just let
interested.
me say that,
Mhm.
as Chris is alluding to, if we add the old and make the old Jamestown information also available, along with letting you see quite a bit of the tour that we were a part of, it went on even longer than they originally expected.
Mhm.
The gentleman, you'll first maybe see a lady there who represents the National Park Service, have a conversation, if you keep that part in, any of it. And then later on is a gentleman who is a fantastic historian, I think, and
Stuff like that.
wonderful, wonderful stories that tie in so many things together. And especially towards the end where he, alluded to, which we've always completely agreed that history is written by the victors. And if they want a story to be told, then basically they may, exclude or downplay something and bring up another story that they want to be more representative of something else. And this is how history in our history books are formed, rather than just unbiased truths of a situation.
Mhm.
So I really, and again, you've heard that in me saying that I so appreciate somebody else who's been, so adamant their whole life to try and bring out the true history of this, to be able to notice and say such a thing as what he did. And I just genuinely appreciate that kind of validation. So yes, so this is going to be long. You'll probably see moments, of course, that you can just kind of take a break, come back to it later if you need to, but it really, I think, is important for us to have it kind of all in one place. And again, today's visit really gave a great overall historical context from his understanding, I think. And then the older one maybe gave some specifics to what our thoughts were then. And I'm sure we're going to try to revalidate or re-get perspective on, was there time travel? Was there Montauk? Was there interference in some of the stuff that later down the road? And again, I love how the Civil War era always seems to pop up. And the forming of who actually was in control of this forming United States. And, as it was forming, who was really going to be, again, what we refer to as the ruling cabal type families. Because again, when we talk about galactic history and history running through, we always talk about ruling parties that are going to get into within lines and get within to still control and have their own agendas going on. So it's a fabulous conversation, and we really hope this gives you something to think about.
Yes, and I did notice that this is also a word of warning for those using ghost boxes in historical sites and stuff like that. You have a limited amount of time where you can keep the device. I know they're costly at times. I understand the equipment is costly. You cannot always factor that in when it regards to the energies in very little time. You can factor that in. I realize that these things are costly. Investigators want to keep these things. I understand this completely, but you must at least once a quarter. That's usually probably after, if you have a few months of continuous use, you have to replace it. But I try to extend that maybe to 6 to 8 months. That's about the limit. Maybe a year if you're really pushing it of continuous use. I'd be more conservative about 6, maybe 8. But this ghost box, they're on the way home. We haven't had this happen in a long, long time. This apparently somebody thought there was some sort of anniversary of Jamestown, and we needed to have a repeat of things that happened years ago. But there was a demon that tried tracing that thing to the underside of our vehicle. tried desperately to bust through our shielding to get to that damn ghost box. And it turns out I more than likely will have to get rid of this by the end of this next week from this time of this recording, because of the fact that it formed a strong enough string. When it starts to attract demons, folks, you must get rid of it. I don't care how badly you want the evidence at that point. Investigators, there's nothing worth having that happen. It will rip your life apart if you don't know how to get rid of it right away. And I was using full force, and then we realized we both had to revoke it because some demon thought us claiming the ghost box was a contract of some kind. That's very important, even though it's our own property. We still, it's almost like we removed an object from the site itself, even though we did not. We left Tower Buster and Assault Puck. It would have been considered no different energetically than taking an object from Jamestown itself. It becomes that after a while. You either have to give it a Viking funeral, which means burn it alive, pretty much, or dead, rather, as the case may be, and or throw it away and revoke or renounce ownership of it at that moment in time. You have no choice after a while, no matter how much you spent on it. So do not be overly spendy on stuff like that. It's a radio sweeper. Even if you take a regular radio, cut the one wire in it and make it so that it constantly sweeps when you use it. Find something cheap, folks, if you're concerned about that. So I will go into the galactic portion of this. I get a funny feeling it's Isaac because he was helping out on the way home. He has been reminding me time and time again, put his communication arc in the car when we go to these places. So yeah, this Isaac, or if it isn't you, just point to somebody. What? Yes, it's you. Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. He gets a little miffed at me if I take chances. So, because sometimes the blowback will linger. Just so you know, if you're somebody that doesn't know how to get rid of it, it can linger for years if you leave it unchecked. So, word to the wise there. So, Isaac. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Never remove stuff from a haunted site. That's what he keeps telling me. Object-wise, leave it there. Yeah, people like to collect shit. So, all right. Yes, it is I, Isaac. In this case, with Jamestown, I know Fuma was the last one to, or previous one, to talk about this since he was there. I think we've all kind of maybe been there in some respects. This is why you are drawn back to those sites, because there were aspects of yourselves from those times as well that being such as he latched onto. Now, have I been in different spots in the ancient times, in different lifetimes, like everybody else? Yes. Now, as far as that history goes, what you're hearing is the surface history, even though they are finding the evidence, which is what they should be following. There's of course the Montauk Project, which of course more than likely will not be proven for some time, and there will be laws, you watch, put in place for temporal travel. Just like in Star Trek, where they have the temporal cords. That is actually a very wise, smart idea. Yes, is there a time core that kind of watches this? Yes, but they're part of the problem. So I say things to them because I know they can't do anything about it, except maybe hear my words down the road. In this instance, the reason you had so much trouble is not only were you walking through the footsteps of your former selves, you were walking through the footsteps of yourselves from 6 years ago. So this can present a problem, but also a resolution, you see. You had presences there that you hadn't counted on. Reason you visit these sites, the reason you've had so much hardship from some of the hauntings of these sites is because of the fact you were there 2 times, now 3. Once in the time, twice in the modern day. One could say that's the mark of 3, but I suppose. But in this, you treading in the very areas that you did, the very spots that you did. Even he was seeing blips in his own head of when they were planning certain things and seeing when there was an established area or when they first walked on it and he saw the person he was with kind of grinning saying this is brilliant or something of that nature. How the English talk. This also begs the question, where else have you tread that now you tread again, just like you did in Japan? The 47 Ronin where they were buried. No accident you got there on day 2 and you tread there again, walk through your own footsteps, or at least he did in this instance. You both did this time. This is why you latch on to this, because of the fact, and excuse some of the creepy energies that are whirling around. I must say that he is partially responsible for this, but I'm not going to do that. In this, yes, there have been some weird curses and stuff abounds lately. That's not your fault. What is going into a site one could call a cesspool of energies, but it was much better this time. Not necessarily a cesspool, but lower vibrational density. With something in tow. You have to watch these things, folks. Now, back to business. In the areas when, as your tour guide was saying, where they just focus on the damn pilgrims or Columbus or what have you, they don't want to focus on maybe the things that they should redact, but they're also told not to focus on the things in some of the guise of going, because they're being told not to, because of some of the stuff that could possibly come up, that somebody could possibly detect either energetically or see physically. And yes, they do miss things from time to time. Say in your Roswell crash, for instance. Yes, there's still evidence out there where the Nazi ship crashed. You might not find it very easily because it's sometimes the size of a pea, or even a pinhead, or even a grain of sand. But it is there. And if somebody would have the proper detection equipment, they could see it. And they could sense it. Like what he said about the temporal signature. That is absolutely 110% correct. Not many people know that, except that they've read the disclosure through Star Trek and shows like it. That is something very obscure and very difficult to know. That also can put a target on you, just saying. And even though it's been disclosed. In that, around the time of John Smith, yes, he was going to become the leader of the known world. They kept having him in chains because they thought he was a pain in the ass. Sound familiar? Think of this as the early cancel culture or the earlier targeting. He was a pain in the ass because he went against the established order of things. He also was in his little interracial relationship with Pocahontas. That was also frowned against in that time. Trust me, I know these things. I was in a lot of these different areas. You would be surprised what's acceptable now, which was not then. And vice versa, actually. Some things aren't acceptable now that were then. And also vice versa in other areas where people are becoming too accepted in one area and overly not accepting it in another. It shifts and changes, how much changes, how much stays the same. In this, what I'm attempting to get at is this. When Thomas West came into the picture, as Vessa was saying, yes, did he come from roughly around the beginning of the 1980s? Yes. He did go to England first. Got established there earlier on in the local government offices. Not quite a leader, not quite a governor, but more of an official. Think of an ombudsman or an accountant or some kind of auditor. Did he work with the Gardner family? Yes and no. There were others that were also doing the same. Excuse a second. Annoying something. Anyway, did he get into a public office? Very much like how some of the immortals in history were advisors to people. Yes. But in this instance, he was there to keep an eye on John Smith and the formation of Jamestown. Even though he didn't come till a little later, they kept trying to replace John Smith. They kept throwing distractions at him because they knew he was a natural leader, a warrior. And I'm not praising all of his behavior because sometimes he was a dick, but I'm just saying, think of now. Think of everything that's going on, how some things change, how some things stay the same. Remember this. These things are not new concepts. If you are attempting to rewrite what is the established order or what is considered to be the truth, what happens? Look what Galileo, for instance, they threw him in prison because he said there were planets and stars and that the Earth rotated around the sun. They did not want to change the established order, very much like what you heard in your tour guide. They didn't want to let's say, we redact this. They are very stubborn people, but they're also being told to drag that out and go, nuh-uh, at times as well, like a child. So that people, some guys, sometimes good guys will do this in an effort to get people to really look. Doing the opposite, very much like your Christopher Dunn and your Dr. Hawass in Egypt, where one acted the fool and the other one acted with pure critical thinking, and the critical thinking wins out and shows the truth. There needs to be both sides. This is what goes on with this. Sometimes there's somebody standing back, the skeptic, going, when in fact they already know. But they're playing that role to make sure others investigate that aren't part of those projects, you see, that will come in in a blind study and just follow the evidence trail, knowing full well there's something there. Others will try to cover it up. You're dealing with multiple factions. And some actually play the role of the idiot or the stubborn person that even people like himself may have yelled at one point, saying, what the hell is your problem? And they're actually one of those people. I'm not saying he did. I'm just saying it's happened before. Now, with the stuff that happened with the cannibalism, yes, that was during the starving time. Yes, there were bad rituals that took place there that you did not hear them make mention. You won't hear some of that side unless it's by somebody who is either wise or a glutton for punishment, or just happens to come across it. But there were temporary things like what Vesa was saying surrounding satanic ritual and pagan ritualism, like the sacrificing of animals and eventually people. But also, did the locals also tried to save themselves? Yes, but then they were shunned, of course, saying, "Why would God decreed you awful for apparently something you did?" That was just the culture of the time. I'm not saying it's not stupid. I'm just saying that's the culture of the time. But also, there was a bit of direction towards those people to feel ultimately ashamed, and you can blame the Gardner family for just a little bit of that one. But in this, I will go into questions.
So, I before we talk again about why the Gardner family felt it needed to hit that time frame again, why did it need to go back? I want that to be question number 2. But question number 1, I found really interesting in the gentleman's discussion as to Jamestown being over brackish waters. However, they're trying to surmise why were they talking about the sweet waters that would be normally the brackish water, and there was this thought process of bad winters, or again, that mini ice age that was thawing out, or something where again, the waters were coming down out of the state of Virginia from the mountains, whatever, and hitting and going towards the ocean, and the drinkable water was a more balanced within that James River.
Mhm.
So I am curious about your from your viewpoint, from where you're standing, basically, what do you think about that concept? Was there like a mini ice age or cold winters? What was going on that they thought they had a good water supply?
Some of it was trickery to get people into an area of hardship. Others, they were caught in the middle of legitimate earth changes. Other things were beings in the area that were causing some of the either the good things to happen or the bad things to happen. Some beings felt sorry for what was happening to the people, the forest people being one of them, hence Fuma's people being in the area and family being in the area. Others felt disgusted by the fact that there were humans there other than the natives. You have run into this concept recently, right up to the current day, with beings that take sides and beings that will say, we like these people, we don't like you. And that may seem bigoted, but there it is. Some fairy groups are like that. Some elemental groups are like that. Forest people saw that somebody was suffering and they wanted to help. This is what you were also up against, where they saw, just for lack of a better term, Whitey was going to harm people like the natives that had a reverence for nature, and hence there were some curses put in place. You have run into this exact same concept in the modern day. It's not changed. Some take sides from here or over there. It's a pain in the ass, but it happens. The forest people do that too. They tend to go for people they like, which I totally understand. I do as well. All to each their own. But they don't retaliate against those they don't like. They just don't associate with them, or ones they don't mesh with. Now, will some elementals, like also forest people, steal stuff from people they don't like and give to people they do? Yes. So do some gnome types and leprechaun types. Absolutely, you've run into this a couple of times. That's different than taking away abundance resources or making people do dumb decisions. That's a little much, but this is what was actually going on. Beings that could help with the elements, but also cause a stretch of clean water because they wanted it too. But it also happened to be a conducive agenda. That would be your forest people helping out in some area. But in this, where of course it was the brackish water that nobody could drink, that was something that humans had to figure out on their own. But when they formed the colony, other factions saw what these other future factions were doing in other areas of those projects were doing. Something was recognized that was different and not right. So there were others that moved in to take sides or help in some fashion or harm in some fashion. You'll find that Salem was very similar, and some of your witch hunt stuff was very similar. That was Gardner induced, let's just say, but pointing the finger at who deserves this, a big middle one actually. But this incident with the river, the James River, and also some of the brackish water versus the clean, some people were helped out, but there wasn't enough to be able to prevent a starving time. But there also was heavy resistance in a reptilian fashion, and also heavy resistance in other factions that wanted that to not be established. Now, on to your other question, why was that place targeted the way it was? Two reasons. One, it's a ley line intersection. Two, it's a temporal intersection. It's a temporal event. Is there a time fracture there? Not necessarily, but there's a portal network very close that during the times of Atlantis, it's also caused from that time on the old wars. But like in New York, like what was discussed with a reptilian intersection or a reptilian, nursery being there, and an old like well-like thing that was mentioned in a session. where a reptilian king exists there. In that area where Jamestown is, there is a causeway intersection, but there's also, thanks to partially the Gardner family taking advantage of this, a temporal causeway. Before they targeted this, they knew to use this to make a widespread butterfly effect, like what you saw in your Flash movie, sort of. That's a little too anal retentive in that movie, I'm just saying. But this is very similar, where you could spread a series of effects based on an amplification point, or some call it an earth chakra, or special dimensional causeway, very much like your Serpent Mound or where Stonehenge was put, or what have you. This is a very special area, and it stretches a little bit out into the ocean. Your Outer Banks has a bit of it, your Roanoke has a bit of it, but Jamestown has it. This is why it was tread upon so much that even when the carpet was rubbed the wrong way, it left a scar. It began to heal itself a little quicker. Just like if you have certain areas of the earth, like in Sedona, where the UFOs refuel, military out there tried to take advantage of it and tried to cap it. You know that story out there in Sedona because it's an old spaceport. This was something very similar in the Atlantean age, where it was a place for people to come and go from. In this, you won't see too many UFOs out there anymore. What you will see is dimensional activity and some ET activity, but mostly dimensional, elemental, and reptilian. And I know it's close to the ocean, and they shouldn't be able to be out there, but you would be surprised what some of these beings have adapted to over the course of history. The thing you saw earlier today was one of these. He called it a potato head, which, yeah, okay, but it had more of a goatish look. He needs to check his eyes. It was more of a satyr. But some of those are out there as well, but it is a dimensional causeway. This is also why they put the obelisk in place, to utilize this, bases that are being made around portals. There is stuff in the area, but this was unique enough that they needed something to hammer that down. This is why they have the obelisk, to recycle those some of those energies and pain from that time, as you know, but to create a bubble and to also trap, but also to broadcast to other antennae. What is there, not only drawing some of the energy into the devices from something like that, like a UFO would do, but also giving back to the sources that supplied this technology to them to begin with. Yes, you could say soul trap, stole trade, all of it. Yes, definitely. That comes and goes from there as well. It's sad, but it's very, very hard to stop in a place like that. Your parts of your DC are like a similar causeway, not as strong as Jamestown. Jamestown was, no matter where you went in time, it virtually looked the same energetic map wise. That is a holy grail of a spot to try to run any op like that. That it's virtually untouched no matter what horrors happen there. Of course, you're going to get the death energy. It happens. Of course, you're going to get the ghosts. Of course, you're going to get all of that. But that causeway, no matter what rotation the Earth was on, that apex, both temporally and energetically and magnetically, stayed the same. Those are extremely rare. This is why the Gardner family was foaming at the mouth to use that. No matter what time frame was entered, no matter what continental shift that was, that particular meridian didn't move. This is these are extremely rare staples, and also in places similar to that, you'll find events take place that are more watershed events, like you see in time, where certain things just have to happen, but they might change slightly. Like again, you see in the Flash movie, certain things people become time events. That happened. They knew that was going to happen. They knew it. Therefore, they used it to their advantage. They look for these resources, like they look for gold, they look for all these things. just saying that a lot of the world's treasure is in some vault somewhere. But there are few things out there that people can hunt for. Otherwise, they're kind of spinning their wheels or wasting their time. But with this, though, like your Oak Island, by the way, that's another one of those spots, by the way, smaller. Oak Island is one of those spots that doesn't shift and change. It's a dimensional causeway. That's why pirates would use the damn thing, and also a couple other islands have similar traits. But Oak Island's another one. But Jamestown is one of those spots, both blessed and cursed, all in one role.
So I guess what I want to roll in my head, so I'm just going to try to get you to clarify one more thing with this energy conversation. So to what advantage finding these spots, the one in Jamestown, you're saying a miniature one in Oak Island, for these Gardner families, for these Cabal families, what is it that they get from it that's so important?
A timeless resource, literally in time and out of time. It's a resource that's never ending. If you were to put events in motion in a place like that, you could literally always put events in motion. It would not rip, it would not tear, it would be a constant fact of history. If you wanted to put an event in motion that was more globally based energetically, in a butterfly effect type of thing, you pick a site like that. But they could have wider spread event changing. Wherever they entangle, remember what you said about what he said about the tower busters? Whereas you could link them to any point temporally as well as to whatever name is within them. It's a very similar effect. He's picking up on a real magical concept that the earth itself has. Whereas they could literally quantum entangle anything they want. And it's a resource that would never die because it is linked both dimensionally, expressionally, and multiversally. It's a point in the multiverse and dimensions that is a constant fact, and those are incredibly rare.
So the problem, I'm assuming then, is that let's say that someone goes there and they create a butterfly effect of whatever it is that they are trying to push something in a certain direction. But then you have the next person arriving there. Maybe, I'm assuming, the next person that arrives there is going to try to maybe make an alteration, a change to push something in a direction they want. And so this is where you have those kind of temporal warring kind of things, because they're going after these spots to create an everlasting battery effect of something they're trying to churn out. But yet it causes, I'm assuming, you can tell me, then what you're having is these competing butterfly effect kind of moments that are causing chaos, actually. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, this is actually true. Any alteration you make, very much again like your Flash movie, any alteration he made in the timeline sporadically created the bowl of spaghetti effect. Think of that in reality. That is actually a true depiction, but certain things, just like I said, aren't that anal. Mind you, you kicking a rock, you're not going to all of a sudden create some alternate genomic evolutionary sequence. No, that's too anal. I'm just saying, or too OCD, actually. But this, that would mean every footstep you took would change things. And sometimes it can. But in this, putting a device like you did there in a salt puck with the same effect that these things use. It's the same identical reverb effect. Those devices you make are miniature forms of these. It's a macro micro scale of an actual Earth anomaly. So with that said, with the dimensions and all expressions, timelines, everything, collapsing, evading timelines, all of it, what you know of intersections, dimensionally, multiversally, super omniversally, all of it. You're making miniature versions of that. Micro, macro. Did you think that was not going to have an effect or piss someone off somewhere that wanted to staple in their own version of reality? One of those, even entering like you did, with that energy, began to change a variable. It's like in your Star Trek Voyager where you had the Anarix people, where he created that ship that was a temporal event that he wanted to constantly change the timeline until he brought his wife back to life or and his civilization. But you enter Voyager with temporal shielding, threw the equation variable off, and it fucked up the timeline. This is the kind of weird effect I'm talking about, a temporal incursion, like what they were talking about. Or in Marvel, you have your universal incursions that collapse things. Similarly laid out, or like in your earlier Trek with matter and antimatter in your Lazarus Effect episode, similar physics. Whereas you introduce another variable that somebody else wasn't counting on, that butterfly effect could invert and change and blossom, invert and change and turn to dust. Or it could be elements of the two at the same damn time, if you want to put multiversal physics in there, quantumly stated. This is why that goat-like shithead got pissed off. One introduction, and this happens anywhere you put these to a smaller extent, but if you find a site like this, just know the butterfly effect will be seen by every single goddamn thing that has something invested in that. This is what happened.
So when we get into, that invested in that, and we start that conversation, if I honestly heard things correctly, and again, understand the history of what was really going on, it's an interesting conversation because here you first have a king, that is sending out people to do things. He then cuts a deal with Spain to not colonize, but lo and behold, a corporation develops that can break those kind of rules.
They do
And, that I think that's kind of the interesting thing about this. So what you have again is the introduction, and I'm sure it's not an introduction, but an introduction into the new world, let's say, of what you would maybe not want to recognize as one of the true first corporations. And again, when I'm saying that, I'm saying not for the highest good of humanity, a corporation that's going to come in and basically abuse humans to put in its corporate, goals, and almost again, then creating an environment to have humans treat humans worse. It's all about gaining the money for the corporations for the benefit of others. But you have that moment of that introduction into it, even supplanting the king. So they basically, winked the king, thinking we're on your sides, and they weren't actually on his side either. They just wanted their own interests. But I think it's a very interesting story because when you look at this and then you look at the character John Smith, would there have been a natural butting of heads that he would have worked against that? And so he had to go.
He was against the grain type of guy, It's essentially like corporations do now. Think the Ferengi from Star Trek for a minute, the dog-eat-dog world symbol that they use in their lore, the whole Ferenginar business symbol. That is exactly what was going on. This is also, think about what would you do if you came also from a different time frame. What would you think of doing? Would you make it so corporations ruled the world? Would you make it so that you could put yourself in better positions? Even people in that time, which there weren't very many time travelers that did that, by the way, one or two. I'm speaking facetiously. There were a few, but with this, yes, the basically say no, I'm just opening a company. No, I'm not claiming that territory. This is how they all treat each other. Nah, I'm not doing that. No, you're mistaken. They do this to each other even now. They'll establish in someone else's territory and they'll go, nah, that's a non-for-profit organization. They all do it. This is exactly it. And this is a way to subjugate and control people via finances, via mining, via manpower, via slavery, via all of it. You're seeing the Kabbalistic junk that they usually attribute to the banking families that existed in the early 1900s. No, that is just a continuation of what you are seeing and hearing today. It didn't start, of course, then. That's just more of a public, more regurgitated cabal that you were seeing, the banking families, the known 13 or the known. Of course, the Rothschilds being the most well-known from way back when Napoleonic Wars, all of that. People know about those things, but people always attribute the apex to the early 1900s, like your JP Morgans and all of this other shit. But what you were hearing today was exactly how it is. It has not changed one iota. And these bigger governments are always making and cutting deals, like you hear about people on golf courses cutting deals, just like George Carlin would say. He'd say, oh, they just cut deals and divide this country amongst themselves. This is exactly what they were doing. They didn't give a rat's butt about the natives. They didn't give a rat's butt about the people that were starving. Essentially, they're like Kang the Conqueror saying he couldn't be concerned about deleting timelines and Quantum Mania. The same difference. That's cabal mentality right there. The little guy is always shit up. This is exactly what was going on, both temporally, quantumly, multiversally, and just plain physically out in the open by people that were similar and had similar goals. But they wanted to compete with one another, like with the temporal Cold War type of deal in Star Trek, or they wanted to, like what I've said in the past, with different cabal factions temporally trying to compete and fuck up timelines. Then you add in actual temporal agents, all this other stuff. You have the temporal Cold War, but all that stuff aside, you have companies that wanted to capitalize on people that were already under boot, and they knew this, and kingdoms that would divide things up amongst themselves. These are Faustian pacts, and the tour guide said it correctly. He said Faustian. This couldn't have been a better term to use on that site.
And again, so it's again just kind of an expansion, as we've been saying, things that have been going on for a long time, longer than you can imagine. And again, we're not saying there aren't honorable businessmen out there, because there are beautiful people doing beautiful work. But part of our discussions with galactic history, the formation and everything, coming down again through country's history or whatever, that what we try to say is there's more to it than you really understand, and more true the fact of control that began at a certain point of long ago history never did anything but still try to expand itself, still try to dominate and control, reinvented itself one way or another, became factions instead of one group, now became factions that were trying to outdo one another. And
families and factions.
Families and factions. And then again, the average human just left to be looked at as cattle to be used in general for that.
Yeah. Flags, families, and factions. That's really what it boils down to. Yeah.
Right. And so again, I think there truly is, when we bring this information out, again, something that we want people to think about, not because anything's brand new, because as you even put today, same tactics used over and over and over again, and if they're not broken, they're being used now. So I mean, they're the same tactics that are being used. And so that again, this really is a time for people to take the blinds off, to pull back the Wizard of Oz curtain, and to actually start to question and start to see things for how they were. Because the goal is this what you really want? Do you really want it going this way to move out more into a broader galactic community? I hope the answer is no, that you don't want to lose certain cultures that are, you know what I mean, and make the world one and everybody looks robotic and everyone's a Stepford wife in general, and just kind of living that life, that you want a more radiant inclusiveness amongst, and again, the goal that to come out of under the thumb of some things that have been there for a very, very, very long time. So again, I really appreciated today because it wasn't coming out of our mouths. It was coming out of this gentleman's mouth that kind of validated some of the issues and things that we were, have been trying to talk about. I am curious though, because you did mention about, in the future, laws will be put in place so that this cannot happen. When we had some of these discussions before, one of the things that we thought is that there already was agreements or things put into place to not allow time travel like this to go into these areas and to go in and to mess with them anymore. we've still been uncovering things that have been making us question, what are they doing now? Are they still doing that, or have things been put into place to stop it?
Depends on the faction, actually. Are there time travel things still being kind of condoned? Yeah, very much like in your Discovery, where Giorgio had to be put back in time, and Admiral Vance kind of went. That was a good saying. Something there was a good thing happening, where he just kind of violated the temporal cords and went meh. This is kind of what I'm talking about, where they'll go, that didn't happen. No, didn't see anything. I didn't see anything. It's kind of like that. But there are time travel things still going on in other roguish factions. But even they have noticed if they pull on one thread of the tapestry, another thing can come undone, and they don't want to risk losing what they've created for themselves. Very much like in your Marvel, where Robert Downey Jr.'s character, of course, Tony Stark said, "I don't want to risk losing what I have."
Mm-hmm.
This is exactly the viewpoint of a lot of these factions. They don't want to tempt fate. And it is a Pandora's box of shit that can be opened if you even open one event or change one event, like in the Flash a little bit. Again, not that OCD. I'm just saying it can open a butterfly effect in places that you don't know. They don't want to risk losing what they have. But will some of them be retarded and do it? Yes. So there are some rules in place, and there eventually is going to be more worldwide type of edicts in regards to it. But when regular people find out that this is actually a reality, watch out there, because there might be some people that want to even go back and save a dead loved one, like in the Flash, or stop something in their own life. But remember, you're kind of forged in fire sometimes for a reason, or some things do happen because they're supposed to, and you can fuck some stuff up. Now, other things, no. Sometimes it turns out all right. Just like there's a famous story of somebody that went back and killed his own grandfather, and then came back in this time, and a car ran him over. And that's a famous Montauk book that's out there currently. It didn't completely happen that way, I want to say. I've seen some of these things happen where somebody said, I'm going to actually do this and see if I survive it. No, it's not like in your Strange New Worlds where the La'an character, Khan, gets killed, but she's still alive because she's the centrist of a temporal event. Sometimes that can happen. Sometimes you're tempting fate. Sometimes you can uncreate yourself. It just depends on the way the winds are blowing. It's not always a fact. So in this, there are these factions that do harm each other that way. The competition that you heard about, where people are trying to erase others from time, sort of thing, that has been mostly quelled. That type of competition, it isn't. It used to be like the movie The Purge, where once a year, people got to kill whoever. It was like that with the temporal rules a little bit. They're like, okay, you can do whatever you want one day a year. Then they realized somebody could go back in and make that every day of the year. So they went, no, we're going to end that. That was stupid. So even some of the bad guys don't want other factions to have that. So it is being extremely anal retentively guarded in a lot of places.
Well, that's very interesting. I also find it interesting how in going to Yorktown and Vessa bringing up the importance of the Civil War time frame, where it seemed like there was truly a king, let's call it the king of the hill. Somebody, I guess it took that long for certain ones to really plant their flag, that we're really more controlling this than others. It was, as again, Civil War is mentioned here because of, the deciding of the history of Jamestown needed to be squashed to bring up another story. I'm assuming that from that historian, I guess I'm asking that, is that true? Did that really happen during that time frame where certain people were taking over and the squashing of the Jamestown history was deemed important to do, and to let this other area and this other story come up?
Yeah.
But I find it interesting. So I just want your perspective on the importance of that time frame during the Civil War era for the culmination of whomever really was going to start controlling.
Yes, that was a hedge bet temporal event, like what talk about temporal Cold War. This is what Bethel was referring to. They wanted to squash the Jamestown thing and the importance of because of the nature of the area, but at the same time, they wanted to emphasize, wanted to see which hedge betting race won the day in that way. Do the big throwing of the D&D dice, let's say, which way is the story going to go, or rolling the dice on a craps table with Vegas odds or poker. Who has the right hand. And they do this a lot. A lot of these races do this a lot, and I can never abide by this. They've been doing it for centuries, and they've been doing many centuries, many millennia, in fact. So I don't abide by this type of behavior. Even though, of course, I like a fun time, I'm not going to roll the dice and all of a sudden, whoops, there's a town not there anymore, or whoops, there's an army that could possibly take over. Let's see if they do this. Let's start this war. Let's try to do the fake alien invasion and see who wins this. Let's see how many people get scared by this. No, we don't do this crap. But the Civil War was one of those that was both agreed upon by, this is what wasn't mentioned, by Lincoln and by Jefferson Davis. This is why you felt compelled to go to his house, because he lost that arm wrestle and he was shamed. Not ashamed, no, shamed, shunned. This is how they treat their own. You didn't win this. Now your consolation prize is exile. This is how they treat each other. Your chain of events, your puppeteers lost this bet, so therefore all the meat puppets pay for it. But in the background, those two Kabbalists did agree upon this. This is what wasn't touched upon. Lincoln was not as good as the history made it out to be. Neither was Jefferson Davis. It's just who agreed with what, who didn't agree with what. Oh, I'm championing no slavery. Oh, I need slaves to fill my fields. Oh, I need to claim this whole South, in the name of blah, blah, blah. And the secret society that was there, that was also the meat puppets of whomever. This is the kind of crap that goes on. Lines on a map are changed virtually instantly. Just know your country, the way it looks now, the United States, could change in the blink of an eye. The territories could change in the blink of an eye. You see these sci-fi shows where the map changes dramatically in territorial disputes and everything, saying, oh, the United States changed this way, da. That can happen that way if a couple hedge betting races get a burr up their ass. So this is essentially what was taking place.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and just let you have final words because it's been a long day and get Chris out of this channeling now. But so any final words that you want to say on our adventure today?
Yes, I would recommend doing these things, but I know you take precautions by bringing stuff with you everywhere, which is great. But no, whatever you leave has a butterfly effect. It is actually fundamentally changing the energy rotation, the energy saturation point, and what can affect an area and what cannot. You have now, in a sense, become one of the hedge bettors. This is not always smiled upon. It is by your allies and those that see you as friend, see you as family, like ourselves and the forest people. They are immensely grateful. There are those out there that are not amused. And they are the rolling of the dice kind. Just know it is a gamble to rotate the energies in such a way, and you're doing it intuitively, which means the AI can't keep up. You're doing it logically, yes, for a site, but intuitively by manifesting, say, the parking space that you got and threw it in the storm drain. Just like how when he and his mother would always go to a store and just manifest the space. Oh, I'm getting the space. Boom, that's right in front of the door. That's how you need to continue to do this. Because nobody can hedge bet on that. Nobody can stop that. No matter what they do. AI can't stop it. They can kind of surmise where it's going to happen, but they don't know it's happened until it's happened. So keep doing it, but at the same time, know you have entered this arena doing this. You have proven you can harm these agendas a billion times over. This has not been unnoticed. You may have in some areas, but the effects have not been unnoticed. Just remember this. And remember, anybody that is doing these kinds of magic, haphazardly or well thought out, or even purely on intuition and heart space, just know it's not going unnoticed. In any respect, it's not going unnoticed. It's cause and effect. Paradoxical or orderly, it's still being noticed and it still has an effect. How that effect affects you and affects your world is up to you. Just know that this type of magic, you know the song, so you're going to play with magic, know what you've bargained for. This, just like Dark Horse, this is exactly what I was trying to say. When that song popped on the radio earlier, I was trying to make you see, do you know what you've gotten involved in? And or all of you, do you know what you've gotten involved in when you enter that arena? Yes, it's great. You want to. I'm fully condone it. But you have to be educated when you get into it, when you step into that arena. Just like in Quantumania, when they said humans touch the multiverse, that's when the Kang dynasty said that. It's a similar hedge betting format and vernacular that is being spoken about. They've touched the multiverse. You've touched magic, and magic has touched them. Just remember this. Thank you. It's not that he was like he was concerned, but there are beings out there that are grateful that that's being done. Doing this type of magic. Know that also, I know people that have taken stones and crystals, put them in plasma shungite silver energy water, it's known as, and thrown them into wells, thrown them into dirty, mucky places, stuff like that have a lot of mosquitoes, bacteria, disease, all that other stuff. And that is a form of magic and science and all that thrown together as well. And that doesn't go unnoticed either with beings that prefer environments such as that. Just know it's not in a good way either. It's more like they hate the energy. Now there are amphibious type beings that want the moldy stuff. That won't affect them. That won't affect anything like that. It's just the hedge betting crap is what I'm talking about. And I want to make a point that there are so many beings that we thought were not involved in that have their own agendas, have their own ways of doing things, and this probably warrants its own show at some point. Just know that a lot of the hedge bettors, you don't know who completely there are until you've discovered the effects of what they've done. And this goes also into soul family-ish or genetic lines as well. This actually bleeds into another idea we've been kind of rolling around in our head here. But this will touch on as well. Just know that this we have to end this here for this show. But this is where we're at with this information. This is the edge of where we've gotten to. And we'll continue to break the glass ceilings like this. So if you want to do the last affirmation and blessing, then we can close this out.
Well, blessing to everyone's out there. We send great peace to you. We send great love and understanding for any of the struggles that you're going through. These aren't easy times. We know it sometimes is emotionally, physically, spiritually very hard. It literally hurts. And we want you to acknowledge that and acknowledge our understanding from some of the experiences that we have, that we truly know how difficult these times can be for everyone, and that we send great blessings and again, great healings to you all to help you see and understand more so that you can create the world around you that you want. So we hope you found this interesting. Again, much love, much blessings, and we'll see you again.
Yes, and I hereby close this circle within true benevolence and blessings as well. So thank you everybody for watching this episode of The Lifting, and bye-bye.